he
prick.
seems to be thinking that he's making a point, but all he did was talk a whole lot and then didn't prove anything.
I
You're a
answered
real
every
bitch,
question.
bro.
that the
He
evangelist
proved that
posed
you
to me.
don't care about science at all.
Well, like I said, he talked a whole lot and then didn't prove anything. That's
Well,
the one who keeps mentioning Paige and
he
making
proved-
comments about her motherhood or
He proved that
whatever.
He proved
apparently.
that you prefer. Proved that you prefer to live in complete ignorance.
Well, like I said, he talked a lot but didn't actually prove anything.
No, he proved that you prefer to live in ignorance.
Well, I said what I said.
I think what he proved was that you guys expect us to adhere to your standards of what you think, people should think, how they should think, and what they should think, and we're saying no, we don't accept the same, authority figures and that kind of stuff.
It's not about what you ought to think. It's about what you should think if you want to be rational.
Right. That's what.
Yes, but
those are the
we
same thing,
think-
by the way.
We think the same thing about you, though.
thing.
We don't
No,
think you're being
yeah, but
rational. I mean, your personal life shows that you're not rational. So we find it very hard to accept anything
criticizing. I have not been
from
criticizing your
you
person,
when
your
you've
person,
demonstrated
Paige.
that you're not a rational person.
I've not been
in
criticizing
normal
you
day-to-day life.
Paige, I've not criticized you personally.
I'm not criticising you, Brenda. I'm just pointing out a fact.
You just
It's a
did.
fact.
You
Boys
just
are boys,
did.
girls are girls. Boys
No.
have penises, girls have vaginas. And if you chop your penis off and turn it into a vagina, you're insane. You are literally insane.
So I think now that
You're
you've
attacking
crossed
her.
a line. You've crossed a line, and that's really offensive.
Well,
Hey, why
see
is
you
that-
later then,
why is that
Brenda.
Daily?
Poor little victim card.
Yeah, Paige is attacking
Come on,
you.
Daily.
I never attacked her. I didn't attack her at all.
Yeah, I know you didn't, mate.
I'm not attacking you, Brenda. I'm pointing out a fact. It's a fact of reality. Boys are born with penises, girls are born with vaginas. If you want to say that's not reality, I'm really a girl, but I have a penis, then you're not living in reality. That's just a fact. I mean,
You're
if
being
you're happy,
ridiculous.
wonderful, I'm happy for you. But
Paige,
it's still not
Paige,
reality.
Paige,
Wait,
Paige,
did
there's
someone
no
say
need
it's
to talk about
ridiculous?
each other Gentiles, okay?
Boys
I
have-
really love a
disgusting.
flat earther telling someone they don't live in reality.
That's rich, isn't it?
Me and Jeff
I'm
had
not a
spent about
flat
6
earther.
hours last night talking to this Aussie guy and Cosmonaut, and dude, these guys are useless. Absolute useless.
Did someone actually say that it was crazy to say that boys have penises and girls have vaginas? Did someone say that was crazy?
They did.
I said
yeah.
it's disgusting to discuss each other's Gentiles.
Oh,
I mean, if you stay
okay,
that
first of
fact,
all,
We're
that's
human.
okay.
It's not disgusting at all. People
Canada,
make
yeah.
it disgusting by saying it's disgusting to talk about it. But it's not. We're all human. We all
Yeah,
know
if you
how
talk
to
about
create
others,
babies.
it might be
It's
disgusting. If you're talking
biology.
about anatomy in
Talk about
general,
Gentiles,
it's
don't talk
regular-
But
about
when you're
others
bringing up
Gentiles.
logic and being rational, you need to look at the person as a whole and say, are they a logical, rational person as a whole?
Okay,
And
can we
it's
just
pretty
have
easy
your
to
own
say
I
right
don't
now?
Brenda's not.
Is that okay?
Man, I don't flaunt that, right?
Mind blowing.
Brenda comes on these shows and flaunts the fact that she's a man that's now a woman. She
No,
flaunts
I
that.
don't flaunt
You
anything.
can hear. You
I don't
can
Yeah,
hear
flaunt
she
her
told
raise her
everybody.
voice,
Like, if you
yeah.
didn't
I
want
never
anyone to
flaunt
know, if you weren't
anything.
flaunting it,
Fakes
she
her
would never have
voice
said
and
anything.
Yeah.
I never
Y'all are being
flaunt
out of
anything.
line.
I never flaunt anything. I never bring it up. You bring
Then
it up.
why don't you?
You did.
I never
You
bring
brought
it
it up.
up.
That's how
No,
everybody
you
knows.
brought it up,
because
Paige.
you told everyone.
You brought
Use
it
your
up.
normal voice,
Paige.
Brenda.
No,
I don't
when
bring
you
it up.
first started in this community, you
Brenda,
told everybody. You told us
use
your
your
age, you
normal
told
voice,
us your gender,
Brenda.
you told us you'd had surgery, all that kind of stuff. None of us brought it. We didn't fucking know. None of
What
us
does that have
knew.
Brenda,
to do with the
You
earth?
told
remember
us.
when you were yelling at Right the Hand, Brenda? Use that voice. That's your normal voice.
Yeah.
Right. So all this is just you being afraid because Rational Aussie completely embarrassed you. You're just afraid
No, that
and
guy's
upset.
useless. That guy's useless. Don't worry
No,
about
he
it.
Embarrass
completely-
me
he
how?
humiliated-
I don't know
he
him. I haven't
humiliated
spoken
you.
to anybody I know.
He
He's
embarrassed
made
and
no impact
humiliated
on
you.
my life. So how is... Oh, right. Okay.
Maybe
Why don't
This
you
is
go check on your
ridiculous.
children? Be a
Audio
good
is-
mother. Be a good mother for once.
I thought
not
you just said
necessary.
that you weren't attacking her personally. That sounds like a personal attack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she does
sure
it all the
does.
time, but then is a
That wasn't
hypocrite
her,
and says
mate.
she
That
Hey,
was
doesn't.
me
can we just
asking
can we stop
occasionally
calling her she? It's a
obnoxious,
he.
obnoxious
He
yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know why
No,
people
it's
are
not
giving
even
this
a
person more
he.
rope than they deserve.
I mean, I wouldn't do that to you
Yeah,
guys and call it a he.
Paige has one of the foulest mouths I've ever encountered, and I
It's
was a little
beautiful,
bit
isn't
out of
it?
line telling her
It's
to be a
beautiful,
good
isn't
mother,
it?
but she was just
It's
going
beautiful,
off her
isn't it?
face
It's
yesterday.
beautiful, isn't it?
The
Makes
person
you angry,
irritates
doesn't
me.
it? It's beautiful.
So call her a bitch. Don't tell her about her children.
Well,
How
I
about
would say
Maybe
don't call
maybe
names
she
like
should
that
care
at
for
all.
her
Maybe
children
would
once
be
in
a
a
good
while,
idea.
instead of spending all day online screaming at people.
I
it's
mean,
none
I
of your
can have an
business
opinion.
what she
I can
does
have
with
an
her children?
opinion
Oh,
on.
it is
No,
my.
but I
She's
can
made
have
it
an
my
opinion
business.
on how she behaves. If she sits online for 5 or 6
And
hours a
you made
day,
it my business by telling everyone you chopped your penis off and turned it into a vagina. So
if she spends 5 or 6 hours each day screaming at her computer about flat Earth rather than spending time with her kids, I can absolutely have an opinion on what sort of mother she is.
I go days on end
anyone
without being
can
on this show.
opinion.
I wasn't on the show
Question
before
is,
yesterday for about 6
standard.
days. So you know nothing about me.
Yeah, that's
So
right. He
I've
doesn't.
heard you on
Totally
this show
unnecessary.
countless times. I could add up the hours you've spent screaming at this computer screen and make a very educated opinion on what sort of mother I think you are.
This guy talking with
So
no
instead of
family,
talking
And
no
it would
science, you're
wife.
make
gonna talk about
absolutely no
she
difference to
demolishes you in
me in my
science.
life whatsoever.
Exactly. So she demolishes you in science, and you have
Paige has
one thing
absolutely
left as a
zero.
man is to challenge her motherhood. What kind
Paige
of a
has
man are you, man?
Paige
You're
has
not a beta
absolutely.
gamma. You're.
He's
We
Paige
gotta
not.
has
make a new
You
zero.
letter
can hear
for
by
you.
his voice
Paige
he's a
has
very
zero
young boy.
understanding of science.
You'd be
Paige
lucky
has
if he's even 20.
Paige
Yeah.
has
My
zero
son's a-
understanding of science, just like you don't have any understanding. You have zero understanding of science.
Are you
don't know
talking to
anything.
me?
Yes,
He
you have
said-
zero understanding.
You
of
are the
science.
most foul person, Brenda, I've ever met in my
No,
life.
I've
You
never said
backstabbed
anything.
everybody that
I've never
gave you a
said
chance.
anything bad about
And
you.
Ranty, she's gonna backstab you one day. I guarantee you. She's the most
right.
foul human being I've
how am
ever
I foul?
encountered on
How am I
the
foul?
internet.
How am I foul?
You are a disgusting human
How?
being, Brenda.
How?
A
How?
disgrace.
How?
You are a disgrace to
Yes,
humanity.
yes, I understand your opinion. Why do you hold that opinion?
I care nothing to discuss with you. You are a vile. You have
Did
you have
Brenda,
shown
did you
yourself
back-
vile.
Brenda,
So
Her
how?
many
45
times.
minute
How?
screaming rant
Just tell me how.
showed
Brenda, did
what
you-
kind of
tell me
person
how.
she
Brenda,
is.
did you backstab Jose?
I'll tell
Did
you how.
backstab
You
Jose?
deleted somebody's whole work. You vile
Who?
human
Who?
being. Somebody gave
Who?
you access to their hard drive, to their Google Drive, and you deleted the whole
yes,
thing.
Yes, I did.
That's how vile you are.
Yes, that was
That's
great.
number one. Number
That was
two,
great.
Jose
That
gave
was
you a
Crow
chance on his
777's.
show.
Whoa!
Go ahead.
What'd you say? What'd you say?
Really?
I said you're a vile human being, and I'll give you another reason because Jose gave you many chances to talk on his show, and me many times I've defended you. People bad mouthing you and calling you because you're transgender, this and that. I've myself have gave people shit for bad mouthing you, and what did you do? You turned around and you gave a strike to Jose. So you shouldn't talk about
yes,
anything to anybody.
because I was doxxed. Doxing
So what
is
does Jose have to do
She
with
gave a
that?
strike to
Doxing, it was
Ranty
his
too.
channel.
Yeah,
Just
and
the other day
you
with
stroke
somebody
Ranty,
that
and
wasn't
It was his
is
channel.
a
leaving you
guest
still
on the show that
It was
said
his
something
channel.
she didn't like, and bam.
Doxing is against terms of service.
Hey, Brenda, why did you delete that person's work?
Crow 77. I mean the
Yeah.
person.
Yeah,
Why
why
did
did
you
you
do
delete
that,
all their,
Brenda?
what was it, photos, their pictures? Why did you do that?
The person who put the link to his drive on the internet.
Yeah, why'd you delete it?
He put the link to his drive in a public chat in a public forum, right?
And why did you delete it? Was it
So
yours
why
to
did you
So that
delete it,
gives you the
Brenda?
right to delete it, does it?
That is a
Right.
Wow.
disgusting thing to do.
Why is that disgusting? He put a link to his drive on the internet.
So if your next door
houses
neighbour
in
left
public
their
places,
front
they
door
can
unlocked,
right
would
turn
that mean you
uptown?
could go in there and rob them
He
because
put
they
a
left
link-
their front door unlocked?
Yeah, because
What
also,
about being a decent
also-
human being?
also
You
because
scumbag.
also because he's a con artist. He conned the flat Earth community out of $20,000, which he used to go on a trip, right? And he used to buy himself stuff. It was all a con. He's a con artist.
So now you're the
business is
arbiter
that of
of
yours,
laws in the world
Are you a
and
cop?
dishing
You a
out
cop?
punishments, are you?
He's a con artist who put a link to
So
his.
you're
to
you're
his
the top of the
con.
pile to dish out punishments to these people, are you?
He put a link to
You
his
think a bit much
to
of
his
yourself,
drive
I think,
on
Brenda.
the
Internet
internet.
savior. She's
He
an
put a
internet
link
savior.
to his drive on the internet.
SJW,
Yeah.
that's what she is.
Brenda, have
He
a
put
good
a
look
link-
at yourself. Have a
he
look
put
at
a
yourself
link-
in the mirror today.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Don't be
I'm
a
fine.
hypocrite.
I'm
Change
just
I
your
don't
fine.
think she even
ways.
looks in
I'm
the
just
mirror
fine.
anymore.
Change your
I'm just
ways.
fine. I'm just fine. He put a link.
You're not just fine.
No, Crow
You're
77.
not just fine, Brenda.
Crow 77 was a con artist who conned the flat Earth community out of $20,000, and then came back for more.
So why are you trying to save me, Brenda?
So what business is that of yours? Are you
Yeah,
the
we don't
cop?
want you helping us, so
No, he
no one
put a
asked you to
link
do that.
to his material on the internet, in a public forum, in a public chat.
That's right, public, meaning it didn't belong to you, right? It was public, right?
Yeah,
Kind
it's
of like
too
a
bad.
public park.
It was.
You
It's
know,
all. It.
doesn't
It's
belong
Yeah,
a
so
big
she doesn't
con.
care if
You
any of
can't
those
put
FB
up
people
I
that
don't
were
care,
hurt
yeah.
wanted to see that. She just deleted it all, even though she did it because she was helping.
Yes, I
FB.
did the world.
Right.
I
It didn't
did
matter
the
to
world a
her.
favor.
That
I
Any of
did
us
the
wanted
world.
to see it.
Real.
I did the
She
world
has
a
the right and
favor by
authority 'cause
eliminating.
She's special. He's
I-
special. Look
I
at
did the world a favor
I
by
wish someone
eliminating.
would do the world a favour and eliminate
Yes.
you.
I did. Yes, I did the world a favor by
Oh well, advocating
eliminating.
that someone is killed.
I did the world a favor
Wow.
by eliminating a con artist of
showing your
his
true colours there.
material, where he deliberately faked, the wave over the moon, by only showing the wash from jetliners. Right?
Prove it. Prove
After
it.
they
Prove it.
That
passed
deserves
over the
That's
you
moon.
what you say you
to
call
eliminate his
That's
life
what you
work,
say you call
to
that.
erase
You're
his life
arguing
work.
about what he showed or what he didn't show, but the fact of the matter, she had no right to do that. She had no
Absolutely.
right to
He
delete
gave me
something in a
that
public
right.
forum.
He gave me that right. He gave me
Paige
that
just
right.
advocated for someone to be killed. Can we
Well,
just
she does
acknowledge
that.
that, please?
She
Because
does that all the
if you're going to be
time.
reasonable people,
Nah, delete it.
saying that
doesn't
you want
answer.
someone to be eliminated,
Yeah.
can we just acknowledge that?
She didn't say
Yeah.
that. Anyway, Brenda.
Yeah,
so
from this
She did
community,
say that.
absolutely. I
She
wish
did.
somebody would eliminate
like
it.
that.
Absolutely.
Eliminate. I mean, so you're advocating for someone to be killed, are you, Paige?
I said
No,
from
I
this
said from
community, dickhead. If she never
You
came
said from
back,
this
it wouldn't bother
planet.
me. I wish somebody
You said
would
from this
eliminate
planet.
her. Yeah.
To eliminate doesn't mean what you think it means. You're going overboard
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
To eliminate is to limit somebody, right? Limit.
Don't play semantics. We all know what she meant by eliminate.
No, only you think. You
Oh,
know
see,
what she meant.
now he knows what I mean. Doesn't know me, hasn't met me, doesn't know me from
He's psychic.
Boso.
He probably
Don't worry about
calibrated
it.
his psychic
ESP.
powers, tools,
Let him.
some
yeah,
scientific tools.
So Brenda, do you feel any guilt, any sorrow, any apology for what you did?
Remorse.
Because you asked me why I accused you. First of all, you accused me of being an idiot of science, and then we had this back and forth, and I gave you a reason why I called you what I
So,
called you. Do you have any regret in what you did?
Yeah, I regret having flagged Jose's channel.
Okay.
Did you
We can
tell
start
Jose
with that.
Yeah. Did you tell Jose that?
Oh, I can't talk to him. He won't talk to me.
Yeah. Do you understand why?
Oh, probably because he's angry because I flagged his channel.
Yeah, you shouldn't have done that, Brenda.
Why? Because
But I'm glad. I'm glad that you
She
you
said
showed
why.
sorrow.
I was
Maybe there's
doxxed.
hope for you
Oh
yet.
my God,
I
she
was
just said
doxxed.
why.
I know she just said
So
why.
she doesn't
As I'm giving you a
understand.
compliment, I know she can't help herself.
Okay, SE, let's talk some science, man. Let's get this back from personal stuff into the realm of science.
That's a good idea. Yes. Let's not insult each other. Talk
totally
science.
agree.
You have something
Yes,
with
says the man
Paige.
who
Hey, Sal.
Tell her
keeps
you're wrong
talking
about
about
this
me
and that.
personally.
Yeah.
Hey, Southie.
If you don't
How
have
you going,
anything
buddy?
scientific to contribute, Paige, please let the people who want to talk science talk.
Well, don't bring up my name again, and that's fine.
Bring up your
But
name
if
whenever
you
I
can't
want to,
control
mate. You
yourself
wanna
and
talk
stop talking
science?
about me personally, then I will keep
Calm
jumping
down,
in and
calm
telling you
down.
to shut the fuck up.
You're getting emotional again. No need to use foul language.
Talking
Let's keep this
personally about me again.
And nobody's talking
Wow,
personally
where's
about
your
you.
science, mate?
Nobody's talking
Now,
personally
a
about
No
it.
long
need
time.
to get angry,
So
but
I'd like to ask Rational Aussie a question.
See, personal again.
I'd like to ask.
I'm
I'd like to
Really?
ask.
on track.
Wow.
Very much,
I'd like to
mate. I'm
ask
just trying to keep you
Rational.
on track.
I'd like to ask Rational Aussie. Do you agree with my assessment, or of what Ranty's experiment showed and did?
I didn't see Ranty's experiment, so I can't comment on it.
Oh, okay.
I have a question. It's kind of about acceleration. So let's say I'm going 60 miles per hour. Okay, so I'm going 60
So
miles an hour.
you've got a constant velocity.
I'm going. Excuse me. I'm going 60 miles an hour every single hour. Right. So I'm not stopping. You know, I'm it's 60 miles an hour. If it wasn't per hour, then everything would end at 1 hour.
Yeah,
Right? I'm
that's
just
not
went 60
acceleration.
miles,
That's not
miles in 1 hour. Exactly.
That's not acceleration.
And then I
I'll take this,
stopped.
Brendan. Just let him
Exactly.
finish.
Okay.
Let him finish.
And
I'll take this though.
so let me finish what I'm saying. So if I go 60 miles per hour every single hour, am I accelerating?
No.
Okay. What if I'm going 9.8 meters per second every single second? Am I accelerating?
No, that's a constant velocity.
Okay, cool. So 9.8 meters per second squared is not an acceleration, right?
No. If you're accelerating by 9.8
meters per second
after 2 seconds,
squared
you'll be
is
doing
not an
18.
acceleration, correct?
No. Yes,
Squared,
it is.
Squared is acceleration.
Okay,
when you
here we go.
added the
Okay.
squared, that's 9.8 meters per second per second. That's
There you go.
acceleration.
60 miles per hour is a steady speed. So every single hour, I only go 60 miles, right? I'm not accelerating. I had a confirmation.
Can't be serious.
9.8 meters per second, every single second is a acceleration.
If you're constantly going at 9.8 meters per second, no, you're not
Constant, yeah.
accelerating. That's a
Okay,
constant
cool.
velocity.
Cool. So big G is not an acceleration, is it?
No, you're misunderstanding what
Ah.
acceleration versus constant velocity is. I can
That's not
take
even
some
what
time
Big
to
G is.
explain it to you. It's quite easy.
I'm waiting.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just grabbing some graphs to show you the difference between acceleration and constant velocity. Just give me a moment. I'm pulling it.
Gravity causes you to accelerate by 9.8 meters per second every second. So you increase your speed by 9.8 every second. You're not always going 9.8.
Okay, so we can change that and put it into terms that we're a lot of us are familiar with. Let's say miles per hour, right? So 60 miles per hour per hour.
If you are accelerating by 60 miles per hour, that's an acceleration. You'd be going
Yes,
120
correct.
miles an hour after
Okay,
2
but
hours.
that's not how it's written. It says
It is.
a speed
yes, it
per
is.
time, a speed over time, right?
Miles
No, an
per hour.
acceleration
Sorry,
over time, not a speed over time.
a distance over time, which is
Is this Aaron? Are you just trolling again? You can't be serious, bro.
Distance over time is just speed.
Why? Okay, so think about this: 60 miles per hour. If I were going 60 miles per hour, at the end of 1 hour, I would stop and be like, "Yo, I went 60 miles." Right?
After 2 hours, how fast are you going?
Okay, but at the end of that, we put 60 miles per hour per hour, right? 60 miles per hour squared.
Is your velocity changing by that, or are you traveling at that constant velocity? That's the distinction you need to make.
It's the way it's written.
No, I'm asking you,
Per
are you
hour.
traveling at a constant velocity, or are you accelerating?
It's however it's written. I'm not actually going 60 miles per hour right now, right? But if I was,
so that means
2 hours,
you don't
I would
understand
go
the speed you're
120
going.
miles, right? In 2 hours, I'd go 120 miles. 3 hours, 180, like that, right?
So you're misunderstanding what acceleration is. It's not that hard. An acceleration is a change in velocity over time, not a constant
How do you write
velocity.
that? How do you write that in
so
math?
if you're doing 60 miles, let's keep everything in seconds, because then it's a lot easier to work out.
No, let's keep it in terms that most of us are familiar with. Like driving a car, moving. Actual movement.
That's fine. Let's go. 6 feet per second. If you're moving at 6 feet per second, after 1 second you've gone 6 feet. After 2 seconds you've gone 12 feet. If you're accelerating at 6 feet per second,
where did you get the doubling of the foot every?
That's what acceleration is.
Okay, but that's not how it's written. So it's 6 feet per
I'm
second.
telling you,
per
you're
second.
misunderstanding how to interpret what's written. That's all that's happening. I'm explaining it to you, but you're refusing to accept the explanation.
No. I get acceleration. That's what you don't understand. Is we understand.
No, you don't seem to understand what acceleration is. You think constant velocity is acceleration.
How do you write acceleration mathematically?
Meters per second squared.
Is acceleration
per second.
So
squared.
how about miles? How about miles
when
per
you
hour
write it, you write
squared,
I am
right?
accelerating by this speed, or I have a constant velocity of this speed. That's how you write it. You say I'm accelerating by 5 miles per second, which means after 2 seconds you're doing 10, after 3 seconds you're doing 15, after 4 seconds you're doing 20. That's how you write it. You
Miles
write
per
it,
hour.
I am
per
accelerating
hour.
by this speed.
Miles per hour per hour.
Not per hour. No, you are accelerating by a specific unit of miles per hour. You have to use the word accelerating to define that you're accelerating. So you will say, I'm accelerating
so let me get
by
this right.
5 miles per
Let me
hour,
get this right.
which
Let me
means
get this
after
right.
2 hours, you're doing
hold
10
on.
miles per hour. After 3 hours, you're doing 15 miles per hour. You've used
I
the
get
term
it. You can keep
accelerating.
going. I get it. Yeah,
Uzi,
I've read
Uzi.
that book. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I think Face is saying that the unit in his speedometer is mile per hour per hour. Is that what you see in your speedometer?
No, it's only mile per hour.
Exactly.
So what that's showing you is it's not showing your acceleration. It's showing your
Crow,
current
I'd like to
velocity.
talk to Crow. Crow. So, but when I look at the gravitational constant or gravitational acceleration, sorry, it's meters per second, which is very similar to miles per hour.
It's meters per second squared, not meters per
Yeah,
second.
yeah. Which is meters per second per second.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I go 1 meter every second, every single second after that, I go another meter
per second.
Am I accelerating or not?
No,
No, every other second after it, you're going an extra 9.8 meters.
Yes, the
He
first
can't be
second
serious. He's trolling.
is 1
Okay,
meter.
so it's an increase of 1 meter for every second after that. That's what you're saying?
That's the acceleration. Yes.
Okay.
You're very quiet,
that's what acceleration is.
You're very quiet, Crow.
So how come there's no designation to say acceleration of 9.8 meters or even 1 meter per second per second? Where does the acceleration come from? Because the way it's written, it's very, I think, linear.
It's written
It
as
sounds
meters
linear.
per
It
second
makes
squared.
sense.
It's written as meters per
Yes,
second squared.
per second,
Squared.
right? Brenda, per second,
Meters
per
per
second.
squared.
Yeah, you can write it as 9.8 meters per second
So I
per
go
second.
a distance. Meters per second is a distance, but I do that same distance every single second.
No,
Meters per
that's
second
constant
No, you're
velocity.
increasing the distance
I
by
know
that.
it's constant velocity. I know that.
You're increasing the distance by that per second. So over the first second, you're doing 9.8 meters per second. So when you're writing 9.8 meters per second, that's how you write the acceleration value. So after 1 meter, you've done 9.8 meters. After 2, you've done 18.6 or 19.6 meters. That's your acceleration. So your velocity after 2 seconds is 19.8 or 19.6 meters per second. But you're still accelerating at 9.8 meters per second, but your velocity after 2 seconds is 19.6. So your velocity changes, but your acceleration remains the same. It's not hard to understand.
How long do you accelerate for?
In a vacuum, if you're talking about gravitational acceleration, until you hit the Earth. If there's no vacuum, then you start encountering things like wind resistance.
What's 9.8 times 9.8? Which
Grab
would
a
be
calculator.
9.8 squared, right? Meters squared.
No, the squared is per second per second.
Oh my God! Didn't I just cover that?
No, you're
Can we
you're
just
fucking this
explain
up.
to you how it worked? Do you not understand? I can explain it again.
No, you explained how you think it works, but that's not how it's written. Okay,
That is
because
how
I can
it's
take
written.
it back into
It's
I can
written
take
as
it back
per
into
second
something
squared.
real, like we do every single day. I'm going 60 miles per hour, which is just a distance,
No,
and then
That's
I
a
speed.
constant
I
velocity.
do that every single hour, right? Okay, cool. So in 1 hour, I go 60 miles. In the next hour, I go 60 miles.
No,
You
that's
can't do that.
that's not acceleration.
60 miles per hour every
That's not
single hour.
that's
after
not
that.
acceleration.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's
Thank
not
you,
what we're
Brenda.
saying. That's not what we're saying. You don't understand it.
I know.
So you just don't understand what acceleration is. That's all. Everybody else understands. You just don't understand what acceleration is. That's all that you're showing.
Okay,
That you don't understand when
is
it's
the
written as 9.8 meters per second. You don't understand what that means. That's all it's showing.
What's 9.8 times 9.8? That's 9.8 meters squared, right?
No, god damn it.
No, it's not the number that's being squared. It's the time. It's the seconds squared. That's the bit you're not understanding. It's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what acceleration is. We're trying to explain it to you, but there seems to be some sort of mental block you can't overcome. I'll do a graph for you. Give me a moment. I'll punch it up in Excel. It'll be visual. It'll be a lot easier to understand.
Okay, so I'll go on to your idea here. Is the acceleration then exponential or not?
No, the acceleration remains the same. If your acceleration is 9.8 meters per second, that's your acceleration. That's how much you're accelerating by.
Okay, and
It's a linear acceleration.
okay, sounds good.
Okay, we'll give you that in a present and tied in a bow, let's say, for
Yeah,
argument's sake.
Thank you.
How about
Given us
argument?
eighth grade physics. Thank you.
Okay. How about angular momentum? Let's try that one.
No, just hold on a moment. I'm doing a graph for you to make it nice and easy. Just give me 1 second.
Aaron is just
Aaron, I
trolling.
don't mean to steal your thunder. You can even have it with them. Go angular momentum with them after. I want to sit back and laugh.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm not too keen on it, but I like to hear what they say because just the way it's written, yeah, I think you could, at least Montreal and other folks could kind of understand where I was coming from with that 60 miles per hour. Right.
Because that's it's an increase of
Wouldn't
60
that
miles
just mean
per
that you
hour
increase
per
by
hour.
60 miles per hour every single hour? So like the second hour would be 120, third hour would be 180, fourth hour would be 240. Isn't that what that would mean?
That's how it's
That
written.
is what that would
60 miles per hour. I like that's the way I would interpret it.
Yep, you got it right. I would love to ask
Okay,
Bob
just
Dole a
finish sharing my
question.
screen here, guys. 1 second.
I'm here.
I don't even. I'm not going to be able to see his screen. I don't think.
Just on Discord, man. There you go.
I see it now. Yeah.
Okay, does that make sense to you?
Wait, somebody said they wanted to ask me a question.
I do.
Okay,
but
hold
I'll
on.
wait
I
until
just want to make sure that this makes sense to you guys. So that
Oh,
you've got
okay,
the time
all right.
there in seconds. You've got your acceleration, which remains the same, 9.8 meters per second, and then you've got your actual velocity after that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really not that hard. That's how acceleration works.
So you're saying that I begin
After
with a
7
certain
seconds, your actual
velocity.
velocity will be 58.8 meters per second. That will be your velocity, but you're still accelerating at 9.8 meters per second per second.
9.8 meters.
It's easy to understand. Acceleration remains the same, speed increases. I mean, this is not rocket science, right?
It's really not that hard. I don't understand why it's so difficult, but I'm trying to make it as easy as I can.
Okay, then now the issue here is. Go ahead, Aaron. Finish your thought.
I was just going to say, but it's also very easy to understand that 9.8 meters is a distance, and I do that in 1 second, and then I do that every single second after that, right? So I'm only I go 9.8 meters, and then the next second I do another 9.8 meters.
No, that would not be acceleration.
That's velocity.
Yeah,
that's constant
that's what
velocity.
I'm saying.
That's the distance.
That's what I'm saying. It's not written as a velocity type.
But it's written as meters per second, accelerating at 9.8 meters per second per second.
You keep repeating.
So your argument is because you're accelerating at the constant rate, you're not feeling it. Is that your argument here?
I don't know what his argument is. It just seems to be not understanding.
You're just adding 9.8 every time. 9.8. Next second, you add another 9.8.
Yeah, it's really easy.
Yeah.
But when you square it, it's confusing a little bit because you're squaring something, which is multiplication, but you're really
saying seconds per second.
Okay, hey guys.
That's not Aaron's argument, I don't think.
Yeah, I see what.
But it means you're just adding 9.8, even though you're multiplying.
They're adding the speed where I was just totaling the distance.
Multiplying.
Right.
Yes.
Totaling the distance. Okay, which makes sense at 60 miles per hour distance. Every single hour, I could just add that other distance, right?
We can do this for miles per hour right now. That's easy. I could just change the figures.
I don't know. I already know what you're going to write. What you're not getting the. Isn't it a little bit?
So if you're accelerating at 60 miles per hour, let's just do that. That's easy.
There's no acceleration at a distance every single at the same time frame.
So just change the S's to instead of per second, an H, and then 60.
Yeah, let's go with distance per time, and then
this is funny.
and then plus and then times another set of distance. That's all it is.
60, 120, 180.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's supposed.
Can I sneak in here and ask Bob Dole a question real quick?
You got it backwards.
You there, Bob?
So you guys, you're saying that we increase speed. We
increase
increase speed,
60
but
miles per hour.
You're saying we increase speed but shorten distance, right? We increase speed and shorten the distance. So we shorten the distance traveled because speed increase. That's what you're saying?
No. It's really obvious there. After 1 hour of accelerating at 60 miles per hour, your actual velocity is 60 miles. Sorry, no.
What?
No, I've got it. No, I've got it. Sorry. If you're accelerating at 60 miles per hour, then sorry. Let me think about this for a second. I'm confused myself earlier by putting miles in that first column.
But it's so easy.
Miles, just meters, miles. Meters, miles. Meters, miles. It's not that confusing. Meters, miles.
M and M.
Actually, yeah, that does work. If you're accelerating at 60 miles per hour, yeah, that does work. That's fine. Because after an hour, you've only accelerated to 60 miles. Yeah, that still makes sense. That's right.
And it's the sentence that prefaces the equation, which is I'm accelerating at this. Not I'm going at 60 miles. I'm going at the constant speed of 60 miles per hour over a time.
And so at the end of 2 hours, you'd be going 120 miles an hour, right?
Yeah, correct.
And at the end of 6 hours, you're going 360 miles an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
So that person or object, let's say a person falling at that rate, they will feel constant acceleration, correct?
No, if you're in free fall, you're counteracting gravity, so you won't be feeling anything.
No, you would be.
So you're saying two things now here.
No,
because
there's constant acceleration,
If
Right?
you're talking about falling, it's different, because if you're talking about falling, then you're falling at the same speed as gravity. So therefore, you don't feel any gravity. So you will feel nothing apart from wind resistance.
Isn't the constant acceleration of gravity only exist in a vacuum? Because
Exactly.
No, it
Exactly.
exists outside of a vacuum, but it isn't counteracted. It isn't counteracted by anything inside a vacuum. See, outside of a vacuum, the acceleration of gravity is counteracted by things like wind resistance.
exactly. So you could never
atmospheric pressure,
measure it.
stuff
You
like
could
that.
never really measure it.
No, you can measure it in
You
the
can
air.
measure it in a vacuum chamber.
Yeah, that's what I said.
You
It
can
only
measure it in the
applies
Yeah,
air.
and then you
to
assume
measure it in a
that even though
vacuum.
with
In a vacuum
atmosphere,
chamber.
that's
No,
still the same.
you can measure it in the air. You can measure it in the
Yeah,
air.
but
No,
that's
you
why we've
can't.
got things.
Yes,
That's
you
why we
can.
got things called terminal
Brenda, you
velocity.
just chimed
Terminal
in.
velocity
You
is
just
how
chimed in
fast
and white
something can
knighted.
go before wind
He
resistance
said
stops it from
you
accelerating.
can only see 9.8 meters per second in a vacuum because
No,
otherwise you'll have
that's
factors
not.
that throw it off.
Exactly.
No, but you can still measure it
If
in
you're
the
talking
air.
about the speed that
You can still measure
Crow-
it, but you have
Just
factors
like the
that
speed of
limit that
light in a
acceleration.
vacuum, everything is in La La vacuum land.
It's in La La vacuum land.
No,
I mean,
are you
it's
talking about
just
the
reality. When you're
acceleration of
moving
speed,
through a medium,
increase
that
of speed,
affects
or
the
just
thing that's moving through it. That's just
But we
that's just
live
what
in a
happens. That's just
medium.
reality.
We live in the medium. We don't live
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
vacuum.
Which is why we account for it. Which is why we account for things having
Well, I
wind
mean,
resistance.
saying that you account for
because
the
that's the
variable
reality
is
we live in.
disingenuous, possibly, though. By saying, "Oh, I'm going to account for this variable by removing it completely," and then claim that my results are reality, that's a bit
Yeah,
disingenuous.
that's what you do. Is you hold
that's-
confounding variables. You take them out of the
I'm not
equation.
saying that you don't do it. I'm saying that it's a bit disingenuous to claim that that is somehow showing you reality when you've distorted it in that way.
Well,
It's
you
not
have to
Not
distorted.
really,
prove
though, because
you
we
have to
observe
prove
that
you
things
live in a
accelerate, and we
vacuum
observe
for
the
it to
things
be
that
relevant.
affect that acceleration. The same way that you're in a car, some cars are more aerodynamic than others. Like that's just pure science. Having a look at the effect that things have on other things. We observe
But
that
we
there's an
already know the
acceleration,
car exists.
but
That's
we
the problem.
already
You're only
we
getting
already
the existence of this thing by removing the variable
No,
and
that's
then
not
applying
true.
no,
it
That's
when you
not true.
didn't
it's
remove the
already
variable.
there beforehand, but it's
Can
affected
I
by that
say
variable.
something?
So before atmospheric before
That's
wind
up for
resistance
dispute
comes
that it
into
was
it,
there beforehand. That's
acceleration is
the
quite
problem.
linear.
Crow
There's
But
a
you
wants
know
to
thing
what's
say
called
funny?
something.
You guys always
thing
put
called
something in
terminal
a
velocity.
vacuum, and nature adores a vacuum. Nature hates a
Crow
vacuum.
wants to say something,
Okay,
but your audio,
Sorry, go ahead,
something.
bro.
your volume is
I
very
w-
low, Crow.
How about now?
That's better. Yes.
Better.
Okay,
Hold on,
so
Crow. 2 seconds.
if
I just have to make one last statement.
uh,
We can't make a perfect vacuum, so the 9.8 meters per second works in the non-perfect vacuums that we make, right?
well,
exactly.
that's what I'm going to address.
Okay.
If you are in a car that's turning and you're experiencing that centrifugal acceleration, all right, so you are slammed against the door, you feel the weight of your body against the door, but you are not speeding up. You are subjected to the centrifugal acceleration, yet your speed in relation to the car is 0. So there's a difference between we are experiencing 9.8 or we are gaining speed by a rate of 9.8.
Is
And
the Earth turning?
I just made the few days ago a show on here on Ranty's channel, proving the existence of 9.8. And Uzi, you have a pilot license or something like that? Can you remember how to calculate the turn based on the angle of the turn, factoring in the 9.8 meters per second square to with regard to your speed? This is one of the examples that I used in that proving the 9.8.
I don't
The
fly.
banking
My dad
overloads.
does. I don't.
Hey, I got a question. If during the first second I fall 9.8 meters,
You
how
don't.
fast was I going? What do I say my speed was?
You don't
In the
fall
first
9.8.
second, you would fall, let's say, 5 meter approximately, because your end
Right.
speed is 10 meters and your
Yeah.
beginning speed is 0. The average
Yeah.
would be 5, and that would be the distance that you covered in 1 second.
So it's a distance measurement. Or it's a
You're
speed measurement, not a distance measurement. Is that right?
You caught that,
no,
Toy? distance. Yeah, exactly.
No, you
No, it's
asked me
distance.
about the distance, and I told you how to calculate it if you know your acceleration.
Yeah, if my acceleration is 9.8 meters per second squared, how
Good.
Yeah.
far do I fall after the first second?
So
For
after
the
1
first
second,
second,
you're now
5 meters.
Yeah,
traveling
after 1
9.8
second,
meters.
5 meters.
5 meters. Oh, okay. So you just take it in half. All right, got it.
Is
You,
9.8 a distance or a speed?
it's
It's just a number.
acceleration.
Depending on what you're talking about. Are you talking about it as a speed or a distance? Because
9.8 is
That was
an
my question.
integer, isn't it?
Could be a
He's asking about it in the equation, in the confines of the equation. What is it?
Doesn't it represent the distance, and then the per second is telling you at what rate?
Yes, correct.
So in the first
No.
second, you
So
would
the
fall
9.8
9.8
part is only
meters.
representing distance. It's the rest of it that tells you, that starts to lead into the velocity or the acceleration.
Yes, you're
Well, that's
covering
what my question
9.8
is
meters.
9.8 meters per second squared the distance you travel, or is it the speed?
No,
The
the
speed.
rate of
Distance.
change of your speed.
Yeah, it's the rate of change.
Yeah, that's
of
the
your speed.
acceleration. It's not distance or speed. It's the acceleration. It's the rate at which your
That's your
speed is
acceleration.
increasing over a set amount of time.
Yeah.
Right. So after 1
Every
second, you'd
second,
fall
you
five
will increase
5
by
seconds since it's
9.8.
linear, or 5 meters.
It has nothing at all to do with speed at all. Nothing. It has nothing to do with
No,
speed.
after
It has to do with time over distance. Then you can make a speed out of it, but you're calculating how much distance you're going over a time. Then you can add the speed, but what you're calculating with that is time over distance.
And
So,
it's still
so
linear.
the distance after 1 second is what? 9.8 meters or 5 meters?
Half
If you
that.
go
It's
from
half that.
standing
It's
completely
5
still
meters.
and you accelerate at
So
9.8
I'm
Why?
under the
meters per
impression that
second, you
distance
cover
over
9.8
time
meters
is literally
in 1
speed.
second.
Like that is speed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Distance over time.
Yes,
Yeah.
but now the part of this is it's not speed we're talking about. We're talking about you accelerating using distance. Now you'd have to go back because there's not the squared with speed.
This guy's
The
making it
squared is
worse.
what makes it acceleration instead of just speed,
Correct, guys?
right?
Sorry, say again.
That's the way I understood it, is that if you had 9.8 meters per second, you have a speed. If you have 9.8 meters per second squared, you have an acceleration. You'd go 9.8 meters
Just like
in
if
1
you
second,
had
then
if you had 5
whatever
miles per hour,
along
you had a speed, and if you had 5 miles per hour, you have acceleration. It's not
Correct.
talking about speed. It's different. Correct.
Correct.
That makes sense.
I want to
5
squeeze in
miles
really
per
quick here.
hour. Per hour.
Okay, since we sorted this out now, how about we move to angular momentum?
Can I ask a Bob Dole question real quick before that, Essie?
Yeah, he's been waiting a while.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's cool, Essie. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bob Dole, but you seem to adhere to a pretty strict zetetic kind of empirical epistemology, where you kindly only really trust the things that you can experience with your senses. Is that right?
No, it's not that I don't trust anything else. It's that I don't think that anyone has a right to demand belief out of you without one or more of your senses experience it. I'm okay with two people that I don't know agreeing with each other that something is the case and then living their whole life based on the fact that that's the case. People do it all the time across the world that don't know me and never will know me and never did know me. They don't know my family and they think something's true in their geographical location and they live their whole life as if it's true and they can be happy and live a full, complete life. And that's okay. I have no problem with that. What I don't have the right to do is go to them and tell them, I've seen this thing or felt this thing or what have you, so you must believe it now without experiencing it yourself. I don't have the right to do that to someone.
Okay. So my question is Jack,
Mike
gonna help me.
noise. Mike noise.
If everybody took the same point of view as you do, don't you think we would never be able to reach the level of technology we have? I don't think cell phones would possibly exist if you
We
could.
don't have a huge level of technology like you think. Your life is
We
pretty
actually do.
Well, okay,
similar.
but that's
We
that's
actually
kind
No,
of
do.
the
you
side
don't. You
point.
actually
That's not
don't.
really his question, though. That doesn't really matter. My answer to that is that I disagree with this idea that we have a requirement to advance at a certain speed or pace as a human race together. I don't see that. It would be perfectly okay for us as humans to have never had phones. That would be okay. You have no proof that that would be somehow morally bankrupt or wrong for us to not have cell phones. So
Well,
if you could show me
What
that there
about
was some moral
antibiotics?
obligation to advance, then maybe I would be concerned about it. But I'm not. So I'm
It has to
okay
do with
with
money.
So are you saying that
right.
generally you agree with me and that we probably wouldn't have phones if everybody was using the Zetetic model?
I don't know that I have a good way to assess that we like saying that we probably wouldn't. I have no reason to think that we wouldn't develop technology if people were not trying to force others to believe things. I don't think that that's a logic follow. I don't think one follows the other. I think we could all not try to force each other to believe things, and we could still advance technology.
Nobody's forcing you to believe anything.
No, I know you're not. I'm just saying you don't have the right to demand that I believe it. That's all. I'm not saying you're forcing me. I'm just saying we wouldn't have the right to insist on someone to believe it just because you've decided it's true based on your experience or your evidence. See,
No,
there's a difference
we actually
between
know it's
personal
true. We actually
evidence
know it's
and
true.
objective evidence.
It's not a question. We actually know it's true.
Right.
Hey, Brenda,
That's
and the whole
exactly what
panel.
you think, and I'm
You
okay
might,
with that.
you guys might not like what I'm about to say, and I'm kind of agreeing with both sides. But without the fantasy globe and the idea of technology, right? The idea of we can do this. It's kind of, I think Bob understands what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
You know,
So
without
how did
that
you get
idea,
the
life.
right? How did you
Hold
get
on,
the right to
Brenda. Hold
tell me
on,
what's fantasy and what isn't?
Brenda, hold on. Without that
Let him
idea,
finish.
you know, life would be very, how to say, mundane, basic, which is no problem. That's how people live for a long time.
It would be nasty, brutish, and short. Yes, I agree.
But if there was a
In your opinion,
creation,
sure.
listen, if there was a creation of a fantasy world or this higher level, you know, and Bob Dole is speaking the same thing. He's saying, man, that just triggers folks' imaginations, and we go from there, and we do end up with cell phones. Hey, great, but did we need it? No.
But my
So
question wasn't about the globe. My question was about what's a rational epistemology and what's the
I didn't
level of
say
evidence
anything about
that's
the globe. I
reasonable.
just said a thoughtful, a fantasy world, right?
Yeah, you literally said that the globe is a fantasy world. And where did you
No,
get the right? Where
no,
did you get the
I
right to
talked to.
tell me how to think?
I'm not the one telling you how to think.
When you
Actually,
That's
call it a
Brenda.
stating
fantasy,
his
you
own
are.
opinion. That's him stating his own opinion.
No,
He thinks that
he's
the globe is a
judging.
fantasy,
That's a
which is
judgment.
fine.
He's judging.
Okay, you're
But
assuming he's judging. You don't know his mind. You
If I
can't jump
call
into
what
his
you
head
think a
and decide
fantasy,
what he
that's a
means.
judging. That's judging.
it's kind of
Let him
beside the
judge, though.
point. Listen,
Really, don't
There's no
let it
way
like.
for
I mean,
you
at the end of the day, if he
you
thinks it's a
don't
fantasy, it doesn't really.
decide
It's
whether or
pretty
not he's
irrelevant.
judging you. He gets to decide, and there's no way for you to prove that he's judging you. You can't do it. So you
my
either
Yeah,
have
question
I'm
to
not.
wasn't
I'm
That's
call him a
not
what
judging.
words
liar
mean.
or
That's what words
I'll
accept
come
what
mean.
out
he's
and
saying.
I'll come out in first person and say I'm not judging when I say the word fantasy. You know, on this panel, I'm just thinking about what Bob Dole had said to the guy he was talking, and just giving my opinion, which wasn't directly in line with Bob Dole or the other guy. That's all I was saying. Okay.
Yeah, we get that. Could I jump in for a sec? So Bob Dole, I mean, you're here on a flat Earth discussion server,
Yeah.
but I find it interesting that you would join such a server, but have such a difficult position to have a discussion from, because I find that it's almost impossible to have a common ground with you if you reject all scientific measurements, all scientific measurement equipment. If there's no real baseline to start from to have a discussion, what's the actual point on being on a forum such as this if you reject anything that can be used as a common ground to assert what is real in reality?
Right. So
What's the actual point in being here?
I can understand that. I understand that I am not a easy person to get along with necessarily, nor am I an easy person to in have an enjoyable conversation with. I mean, you can ask, the people around me. They understand. They live with me for how long, that I'm not necessarily going to be the person that you're going to have a pleasant conversation with. But I'm not particularly concerned with the pleasantness of conversation or niceties and things like that.
Conformity.
The reason I'm
if I could,
here
if I could,
is because
if
I've
I could
heard
address
the
that.
conversations. What's that?
If I could just address that point, I'm not here for.
Sure.
I mean, I like to keep things polite and civil because I think that
Sure.
that's a better way
Yeah.
to do things. However, I'm here for a productive discussion, not necessarily
For sure.
a polite one. And I'm talking about productivity. If there's no baseline from which to establish a discussion on what is real and what isn't, it's impossible to have a productive discussion.
Right. So my answer to that is like the first one that I got on here for, the first show, I basically made that point is that we need to spend our time in these conversations establishing what the standard is instead of arguing all these different points that come up. I think people get excited and they say, well, what about the curve? I didn't see it. Or what about the moon does this? And I find those conversations interesting personally. And I don't think there's anything wrong with discussing them. But if we're going to try and convince someone else, like if I'm going to try and convince you, or you're going to try and convince me, you and I would have to agree on what the standard is. Okay. What I'm saying to you is that your standard is not one that I identify as one that will lead to truth. It will lead to confirmation of what you already believe to be true. Okay. I don't accept the example that I was discussing the other night with somebody was the Geiger counter. Okay. I can hold a Geiger counter in my hand and walk into an area and it'll go off and beep and all that stuff. And someone can point and say, see, there's radiation. But that device did not prove to me that radiation exists or that it's there in that area. All it did was beep, and someone told me, interpreted for me, what that Geiger counter was doing. That is not a good way to find truth because
Yeah,
I'm
sure it
relying on
is.
their interpretation of the device
What's wrong with
to
it?
determine reality.
What's
Let
wrong
him
with it?
finish.
I'm not.
I'd like to
There's nothing
respond
wrong
once he's
with
finished.
that on a personal level. You can do that if you want. Again, I'm not going to try and stop you. I'm not going to rely on somebody else's uh, interpretation of reality to determine my own interpretation of reality. If you say to me you own a teleporting monkey and that you've seen it and you've felt the monkey and you know it's real, and then you tell me, "Hey, this little device I built proves that there's teleporting monkeys and it shakes a little bit in your hand," that doesn't tell me that there's teleporting monkeys. I'm going to say to you, no, that's impossible. Teleporting monkeys don't exist until you show me with one of my five senses a teleporting monkey.
Along the lines of
Okay,
that, now I'll bring it back right back down to home real quick, just real quick, right back down to home. Is when I go
respond. Let
when I
rational
when I go.
respond. Let
Let's just say
rational
this. When
respond.
let's
Let
Brenda,
rational
just
respond.
Brenda,
Let him
Brenda,
respond.
Brendan, be quiet.
Let
Okay.
him
Let's
respond.
say I take my car. I
Let
take my car
rational
to a
respond.
mechanic. I take my car to a mechanic. I know it needs an oil change. I end up walking out of there with a $1,500 bill. He sells me all these sensors I don't need. He tells me all this stuff that I don't have any clue what's right, what's wrong, or how it works or anything, right? And I get sold the idea that that's what I needed, right?
That's why we should learn stuff.
Exactly,
So
Crow.
hold on. Can I respond to the real Bob Dole? Because I'm attempting to keep this civil, where I allow someone to finish, but unfortunately, people tend to jump in mid sentence, and it creates a difficult sort of forum to have a
kind of
back and
lose your
forth
train of
discussion.
thought, right? Lose your train of thought.
Exactly. So if I could just address you, say now you don't believe other people's interpretations of reality. That causes a problem, especially in the world we live in right now, because we live in a world where there is incredible specialization in almost every field. If we were talking about living in caveman times, whereas that is a heavy rock, you can go over and pick up that heavy rock and we can both agree on it. But we don't live in that sort of reality. We live in a very specialized reality. Do you accept that there are people with expertise in certain fields that you defer to their opinions on things? Do you accept that or not?
So
For
that's a
example,
broader.
if
I
you're
think that's a
asking
broader
if you're
question
asking a
than.
pilot, if you're talking about how planes work and how flying works, would you trust the
Okay.
opinion of a pilot?
So there's basically two possibilities. I will trust the opinion of somebody else who seems to be more knowledgeable or has an idea of something. I have no problem trusting that person entirely on what they're saying, right up until it directly contradicts my own evidence that I have. Once it contradicts the own evidence that I have, I'm no longer. Why would I believe it anymore? They haven't shown me anything that contradicts what I've already experienced.
Okay, can we apply that same principle to scientific measurement tools, that you will trust a scientific measurement tool until it contradicts something that tells you it isn't correct? Can we apply that same logic?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we can both agree that like a tape measure actually measures a tape, like the distance. We can acknowledge that scientific measurement tools work.
I don't necessarily agree with your label for it, but I agree with your point.
Okay, well, this is a great baseline to start with, because once we can start trusting certain tools to give us accurate measurements, then we can start measuring things and testing things. So that's a great baseline to start with.
Keep in mind, a tape measure is a manual tool which I could use myself every single day. So
Yeah.
when you start to go off into space, just be careful.
Possible that I maybe did not clarify my position. I was not claiming that we throw out all tools and never use them. What I was stating earlier is that you can't find reality or truth. You can't find truth from an imperfect tool that is based on the measurement or the calibration of another imperfect tool. You can't do it. You can't find perfection from non-perfection. That's not how it works. Perfect has to create perfect. Okay? You can't create perfect from imperfect. So you can't take a tool made by man's hands and make something that is more perfect than what man's hands are capable of.
I'll accept that happily. However, I would also postulate that a better understanding of our environment is better than no understanding. So you don't need a perfect understanding of something to understand something better. Having a tool that measures something imperfectly is better than having something that takes no measurement at all.
Right. Right up
So
until
once
that
we've got
imperfect
those
measurement
tools,
moves in on somebody's personal experience. So if the measuring tool says, we'll just throw out a random example. If it says 5 inches and somebody has lived their entire life working with whatever thing you're measuring and it's always been 6 inches, and right now their child's life depends on that measurement in the next 10 seconds, it's okay for them to reject your tool in an attempt to save their child's life and say, no, it's 6 inches. I don't care what your tool says. See, so it matters what the context of the measurement is and what you're trying to accomplish with it.
yeah, I'd agree with that completely.
Okay.
However, but that's still deferring to somebody else's opinion on something, an expert on that subject. So if you're talking about deferring to someone with expertise, I'd absolutely agree. I defer to people with more expertise in fields than myself all the time for that exact reason.
Yes. Yes. Right up until it violates the personal experience clause, I guess you might call it, then that's perfectly fine to trust somebody. I mean, of course, it's normal to trust somebody else with information that you don't have personally. But once you have contradictory evidence, contradictory experience, well, now you have the right to question the information they've given you.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I love this. We're finding a great baseline here. So let's expand on this slightly. Would we agree that, however imperfectly, as a general rule, most things like a car's speedometer give you a fairly good representation of how fast you're going or how far you've traveled? Doesn't have to be perfect, just a better understanding than if you were guessing it yourself.
Okay, so I guess I'll answer that. If speed is what it's claimed to be, which I have no reason to think that it's not, okay, and all those tools are working as they claim to be working, then yes, using one of those devices to determine your acceleration or your speed would be better than attempting to, depending on the human, try to keep track of it inside your head, probably moving at 60 miles per hour or what have you.
Okay, fantastic. That's a great. We're getting a really good baseline here. So then when we start talking about things like aviation, would you agree that the measurements and the tools used in aviation are more precise than something like a vehicle speedometer, simply because of the nature of the industry, the safety standards they need to meet, and the sort of the time and technology that's gone into it? Would we agree that aviation measurement tools are generally going to be a lot more precise due to safety?
Non-correlation.
I
You can't
yeah,
go
I
from
wouldn't
speedometer
move
to
from
Yeah.
a vehicle that I drive that meets my purposes and I consider it accurate for my daily purposes to a larger machine that I don't really know much about automatically being more accurate because somebody has deemed it more important.
That's okay, but we agreed that unless you have personal experience that invalidates something, we're happy to defer to some people that have more expertise. We've already established that baseline, correct?
certain people, not anybody. So I don't have the right to go to you and say you must believe my friend because they've given you information and you don't
Yeah, yeah.
have contradictory information.
And
No,
there's a
that's
big
not what I'm
difference
saying.
between going
But
to the store. There's a big difference
hold,
between
hold
going
on.
to the store at 60 miles an hour and going up, 45,000 feet with let's say, a cargo load of people, right?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree.
Okay.
Things need to be a bit more
Okay.
precise when
So
you're doing something like
why
that.
don't you
So,
keep
so
your
we agree that
example?
the
We're already on a baseline. Keep your
no, no, hold on.
example,
I'm just having a chat with the
in
real
more
Bob Dole here.
correlation
This is being
to what
productive.
you're talking about. Okay. Don't go off the cuff.
No,
Okay.
no, we're
Sometimes
establishing
people
a
say
really
that
good
I sound
baseline here.
angry. I'm not angry right now. I am enjoying
No,
our
no,
conversation.
as am I. It's civil, and we're actually getting places. So we've got a baseline that generally we can trust tools that measure things unless they've given us a reason not to. We can agree that hopefully we can agree that aviation is by and far quite safe. Things take off and land every day, thousands of times a day, with very few incidences. Correct?
That seems to be the case, although I will adjust that a little bit, unless something else has given us a reason not to. It doesn't have to be that specific person or tool.
That's okay. Cool. Well, I mean, I'm happy with that as well. And so when an aircraft takes off, they've got a certain amount of fuel. They fly at a certain velocity. They know how far they've got to travel. Correct?
That seems to be the implication. However, I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't know for sure if pilots actually know how far they're supposed to fly. From what I understand, that's not necessarily something that they would even attempt to verify. They get
That's
their
okay.
coordinates. They have the machine do the flying most of the time for them. They land the plane. They take the plane off. So I don't know that they actually have a real idea of how far they are traveling or need to travel.
That's all right with that. And once again, we've established that point where unless we've got evidence that contradicts that or any reason not to believe that's the case, then based on aviation safety standards, the need for precise tools to land on a runway, to take off, to maintain air velocity, to not fall out of the sky and kill everyone, unless we have a reason to think otherwise, it's reasonable to assume that those tools are accurate, that they can accurately process time, how much fuel they need to burn, and how fast they go. There's no reason to think otherwise, correct?
Yeah. If we don't have anything that contradicts that, then it makes sense to just go along with that because it seems to continue to work.
Okay, fantastic. So let's talk about some flights between various countries. They know how much fuel to carry, they know how far they need to travel, and all of that information is widely available. So when we're talking about a flight, for example, from Perth to South Africa, we can, within a fair degree of error, it doesn't have to be perfect, we can roughly estimate how far that distance is based on what we already know about the amount of fuel, how fast the plane's traveling, and the wind resistance, all that sort of thing, all the stuff that we know fairly well. We'd agree on that, correct?
You're you're asking if we can determine the distance they're going to fly based on how much fuel they're carrying?
A combination of things like fuel, weather patterns,
Okay.
all of the instruments we're talking about that we say don't have to be perfect, but accurate enough to
Right.
maintain the safety of the aircraft.
Yeah. I mean, if they're going to where they claim they're going to, sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So when we talk about a flight taking off from Perth, flying over to Johannesburg, we can estimate roughly the distance that flight travels, correct?
That seems reasonable.
Okay, cool. And we can do the same the other way from, say, Melbourne to Santiago, because these are two flights that I've personally taken. I'm very fortunate. I've been able to travel a lot in my life. I've taken a lot of these flights, and I've personally verified using the GPS on my phone that the distances are very similar to within about 100 Ks or so, which I put down to a little bit of a GPS error. Okay, cool. So this is where we start to talk about the shape of the planet. Those flight paths, which we can ascertain to within a certain degree of error, and a reasonable degree of error, are certain distances from, say, Perth to South Africa, Melbourne to Santiago. They only work on a spherical Earth. If there's any other sort of shape of the planet is that those flight paths and those distances would work on, I'd love to see it, but I'm yet to see any sort of empirical evidence that works on a non-spherical planet. And that's based on everything that we've just discussed. What would you say to that?
The problem I have with the claim that couldn't work on any other shape is this. When someone makes a claim like that about anything, what they're actually saying is they have the knowledge of every other way that it could possibly be put forth, and they know that they don't work, and therefore theirs is the only one left that can work. Nobody can possibly have that much knowledge. Okay,
No, that's
so
not my
you
claim.
can't say
I'll tell you what my claim is if you like. My claim is that
maybe I misunderstood your claim.
that's the best fit answer at the moment, based on the evidence that we have, based on those measurements that we can take, however imperfect. The best fit or the best explanation we have at the moment is on a spherical plane, a spherical planet. If there is a better explanation, I'd love to hear it. But what I'm saying is that given that data, that's the best fit we can make, knowing what we do know, as imperfect as it may be.
But the words best and better are subjective. That's not a measurement. Best and better.
No, okay. So that it's
Deciding-
the most probable, however you'd like to say. If there's a better explanation for how those flight paths work, I'm all ears, but I'm yet to hear any sort of better explanation for how those flight times and distances do work. I'm not saying that is
Well,
definitely what the case
I
is. I'm
don't
saying it's
claim
the
to have
best
a better
explanation for what we see.
other than I mean, yeah, I don't have an explanation for how the planes get to those places. They
That's
go up and
fantastic.
come down.
So that this is where we start formulating our best fit for the sort of what we're actually living on. What we do is we take all the information that we do have, as imperfect as it may be, and we try to explain it in the best way possible, knowing what we know. Now, we don't know everything. We'll never know everything. But what reality is your best explanation based on the information that you do have, as imperfect as it may be.
Okay, so here's the problem with that. All right, let's say that um, I live out on a farm somewhere away from everybody else, or I mean, you could even assume I'm the only person on the planet. Okay, and I raise chickens, and they lay eggs, and I raise cows, and they give me milk. All right, and those are literally the only two animals I've ever interacted with. And one day I'm walking along in the forest, and I find an egg. Based on my information, literally the best conclusion I can come to is that I have found a chicken egg. However, I'm sure you would agree that that is not a good conclusion to come to based on reality or truth. Okay. So I can say to my friend, if I'm not the only person on the earth, I can say, I think this is a chicken egg, or I can even tell him, I believe this is a chicken egg, and then I go home and I fry it up because I believe it, I'm willing to act on it. So I try and eat it. Okay. But what I can't tell him is that because we don't know of any other animals in the world, we can't have any other conclusion other than this is a chicken egg, no matter what. That's not right. That's not okay. Even though my information, everything that I have, all the tools that I have at my disposal tell me it's a chicken egg because chickens are the only things I know exist, I don't have the right to say it can't be any other animal.
Yeah, I totally agree. But that's the beauty of being alive and learning things, is that we use all of the information we currently have to make the best fit for the place, for the environment that we live in. So until you get more information that contradicts how you currently interpret or understand things, it's completely reasonable to have a best fit scenario.
Oh, yeah, and I'm not claiming that someone can't do that, but they're not required to do that. So they can say, okay, these flight plans work and these planes work and people seem to get to their destination. Therefore, I'm willing to believe we live on a ball until something else comes along that would indicate otherwise. Okay. Someone can do
Perfect.
that, and that's perfectly fine. I have not argued against somebody doing that personally. What they don't have the right to do is tell someone else, hey, look at these flight plans. Hey, look at these planes. Hey, look at these people making it safely to these places. Now you must believe because I consider that good enough.
Yeah, and that's not what I'm trying to do. So
Well
I
said.
agree with you on that. I agree with you on that as well.
Can I
So,
ask a
but I
question for
think
both?
both of us, having had this discussion, would you agree with me that they're at the moment, based on what we both know, and as imperfect as it may be, the best fit for those flight plans existing is a spherical Earth, because we don't have a better explanation right now.
I wouldn't agree to that, and here's why. I have personal experience or observations that would indicate that the Earth cannot be a ball, and therefore the flight plans, while they do work, there's other evidence in a different area that says it can't be a ball.
Exactly.
So in
Yeah.
my mind, it's like, well, I don't know literally every possible option for those flight plans that could make them work. So it could possibly be something else. And since I have this knowledge over here on a different subject saying it can't be a ball, I'm going to say it's not a ball. I don't know what it is. I don't know how those flights work, but I don't believe I'm on a ball because that's what my experience tells me.
So, okay, if you apply the same logic but in reverse, say you have personal experience that says you don't live on a ball, but then you have another personal experience, which we've just discussed, that says these flight plans don't work on a flat plane, they only work on a globe. Could you not make that same argument in reverse, saying that these
But you
flights
can't
do
say
not
they
work
don't work
on
on a
my...
flat
Hold on,
plane
Paige.
because
Hold on, Paige.
you're not
We're having a
sure.
discussion. You need, like, Paige, we've been very cordial and very civil, and we've been waiting for each other to finish. Appreciate it if you had the courtesy to do the same, please.
So the way I would answer
God,
that
you
is
are a
this is false
passive-aggressive
dichotomy.
prick, aren't you?
The idea
Oh,
that we have
Paige,
to
just
choose
leave the channel, mate. We're having a decent discussion.
the idea that we would have to choose between sphere or flat, I don't believe that. I don't think that we are limited to those two choices. You're either one or the other, and you have to pick a side. I don't pick either of those sides. All I pick is I don't need to know the shape of the earth to live my life happily, to live it contently, to live it fully. Okay? I don't need that information. Based on the information I do have, I can say for certain I have no problem making the claim I do not live on a spinning ball. I cannot show you what I do live on, but that's okay with me. I could die tomorrow not knowing that, and I will not be any sadder or worse for not being able to tell you what we do live on. I'm okay with knowing what I don't live on.
I'd like to hear what kind of observations you have that do not match our model, the globe model.
Oh, yeah, I've seen people showing like I mean you can go on YouTube and watch this, and I even took my camera out the other day. We went on a micro vacation over to Marinette, Wisconsin, and the ability to see uh, out further than what the curve of the Earth would have to be for its claimed size does not seem to align with the claim that it is a ball.
Did you
Aside
see
from
this?
that, the
Did you
sky,
see this yourself?
yeah, I just said
No,
we just
no. You
went a little
said
while
you said
ago.
you saw somebody else put this online.
And then I also added, yes, I have seen somebody else, and then I added, we just went on like a micro vacation over to Marinette, Wisconsin, just like a week, 2 weeks ago, a week or two ago, and I did it myself with my camera.
Do you think it's
And
impossible that the atmosphere could let you see farther? You should on a globe.
impossible?
Yeah, is it
I wouldn't make that.
impossible?
I wouldn't make an absolute claim like that. That it's literally impossible. There's no way it could happen.
Okay, so then so far we don't have an observation that makes sure that you know we're not on a globe. Do you have any that make you know we're not on a globe?
Okay, so maybe it's possible I'm not clarifying this well enough. I don't have an observation that would convince you. I can't do that for you. All I
I
can
was
say
wondering
is
what
the
convinced you.
observations I have, like um, I don't feel the movement of the globe. So every experience in my entire life tells me that when I move, I will feel it. I absolutely will feel every time I move. It's never not been that. So when someone tells me I'm constantly moving all the time, I'm going to tell them, no, I know what movement feels like. I've never moved and not felt it. So I'm not moving unless I feel it. Okay. That would be an experience that is contrary to the claim that I'm spinning all the time.
And I would back you up on that, bro. 100%.
So
Could I
in
just
our
jump in and
model,
say that I'm super happy at how civil this is maintaining, and if we can keep discussions happening like this, we'll actually get somewhere.
how much motion should you feel, or what motion is it that you should feel, and how do you think you would feel it?
If somebody claims that the ground that I walk on or sleep on or interact with is moving at all and I'm not feeling it, then I am going to disagree with them. I've never had an experience where I have moved or the thing I'm inside has moved or anything like that, and I haven't felt it. I've never experienced that.
So let's
Well,
say that
what?
while you were asleep, I put your house on a lazy Susan and I was spinning it one rotation every 24 hours. Do you think you would feel that?
What is a lazy Susan?
Let's just say I'm spinning your house once every 24 hours and you didn't
Just think
experience
of a
that.
giant merry-go-round.
Do you
Yes, I
think
would
you
be
would
able to
feel
look outside and see that I'm spinning.
We're talking about feeling it though.
Well, okay, that's only one of the five senses. I have five senses. Whenever it doesn't have to be feeling. Any of the five senses are valid for showing somebody that something is reality. Any of the five senses, or even multiples of the five senses. So
Okay,
if
so what would you see if the Earth was rotating? What would you see?
I
You would
would
see the sun
see
and the moon and
movement,
the stars spin overhead, right?
yeah,
And that is what we see, right?
yes,
Okay, so sight works for this observation. So do you think you would hear it rotating?
Squeaky Earth.
uh, I don't have an example of something that I don't hear when it moves. Do
There's
we have an
nothing that.
example of something spinning and not being able to hear it?
How about the hour hand on your clock?
You hear that?
You hear the hour
I mean,
hand on your clock?
yeah, when it moves. I mean,
The hour
is that
hand.
not a normal thing? Like
Not the
clocks tick,
second
right?
hand. Not
The
the
Okay,
hour
let's say
hour
it
hand.
does.
hand.
The hour hand.
Okay.
Hour hand.
Well, yeah, I suppose not. I mean, I guess I wouldn't know because you would have to be listening at the time that it moved to make sure.
all the time.
Okay, so what other senses do we have left that you might use to perceive this 24-hour rotation?
What do you mean? We just have the five senses. That's it.
Okay, so which one of these five senses do you think you would be able to detect this one rotation per 24 hours?
Movement and sight, or feeling,
So,
feeling and sight,
okay,
touch,
so we
or whatever
discussed
it's
that
called.
we discussed that what you should see if it was rotating is what we actually do see.
Okay,
So one of your
you
senses
said
agrees
that.
with the
I don't
rotation.
necessarily believe that that's the case. We see something that looks like it's moving. You claim it's
Well,
rotation, but seeing something
no,
outside of yourself move is not automatically the thing you're on is moving. That's not how that
mm,
works.
Hey
that's not what
Bob,
I'm saying.
ask him if you were at the equator at one point traveling at 1,000 miles an hour. Ask him what you think he would feel at that point, or see,
That's
sense, smell.
the whole
Ask him
question.
that.
That's what I've been asking.
If I could jump in, SE, if you're in a vehicle traveling at 1,000 miles an hour at a constant velocity, you won't feel anything either.
I I don't know why you would think that. I've never been driving in a vehicle and not felt it.
No, you
Define
feel the
feel.
acceleration. I'm talking when you're driving at a constant speed, not the minor bumps in the road. I'm talking about the actual feeling of moving, not the undulations in the road. Once you're at a constant speed, for example, with
Okay,
cruise control on,
right?
you
But now
don't feel the movement.
look what you've done. You've shifted from a theoretical, perfectly unobstructed path at a velocity that I have literally never traveled at. So now you've taken it out of the realm of every day that I live and can experience with my senses into a theoretical, if you could do this without ever feeling a bump, if you could go this fast, if you could go that fast for this amount of time, if you didn't have any sort of resistance that you would feel, then after all those parameters are met, then my case would be true. Well, that's not reality. So saying that while you can say theoretically that would be true, that's not a sense. That's you coming up with a theoretical situation that may be true, but that I have no way to verify.
Have you ever been on a maglev train when it's at a cruise speed?
Uh, no, I've never been. The only trains I've been on are we went to Canada, I think, once, and it was on like regular tracks, maybe like mini trains, but they were also on tracks. I've
Yeah,
never
yeah.
been
If
on
you
the
ever get a
maglev.
chance, if you ever get a chance to go on a maglev train, once it's at cruise speed, you're moving at like 350 kilometers an hour, or I don't know, like 200 miles an hour, whatever freedom units that is, and you don't feel anything. It's just perfectly smooth. That's something you can test yourself.
I think
There's
the point
videos
is,
about that.
even
The
though,
Chinese
even with
What would you tell someone who gets motion sickness?
Take a maglev train.
Hold on. But
Yeah, but
what do you do
if they
about
get motion sickness, then they would be feeling it because it's physically making them sick.
Motion sickness is related to the inner ear and your inability to see the horizon. I've spent a fair bit of time on boats as well. If you ever get motion sickness, one of the easiest ways to stop yourself getting motion sickness is to keep your eyes on the horizon, because it's the differential in your inner ear that causes that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen without swinging from side to side.
It only happens
That's
with
not what we
movement. It
discussed.
doesn't happen from speed. Motion sickness doesn't happen from speed.
Swinging,
it happens
not
from,
just exactly.
Movement. Yeah, like
I would
a
prefer to not
displacement
lose
of
the
the
spot
water
that
in your
we were
inner
at
ear.
with the train.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So the
Sorry.
maglev train. Okay, so we'll compare that to my analogy of the teleporting monkeys. Okay, so you tell me that you have a teleporting monkey. Well, then you say, well, here I can point to a monkey, and I say, oh, well, yeah, you're right. Monkeys do exist. I can accept that monkeys exist without accepting that you have a teleporting one. So in the same way, you might be able to get that train after it started moving, and we just ignore my acceleration to get moving. When it's in a state where it's going at constant speed, you have to divide out or take away the part where you start and the part where you stop. Everything that we know starts and stops somewhere. So now you're saying that the movement that I'm not supposed to be detecting not only existed before I was born, but will continue to exist the entire time alive. And after I'm dead, it is perpetual and no one will ever be able to feel it. So now you've still taken it outside of the box of context that I would have with my five senses to determine something is accurate. Just like with the monkeys, I can agree that a train exists where I wouldn't feel the constant motion after it's at speed, just like I would agree there's a monkey. Once you move on to also the speed will be perpetual no matter what, well, now you've gone into the teleportation part. I don't know of anything that is perpetual in the way that you would claim that the motion of the earth is perpetual.
Unfortunately, the only way to falsify that is to stop the rotation of the earth. So you're creating an unfalsifiable claim.
But I'm okay with that, though. I'm okay with not having that be falsifiable. I'm okay with not believing that we're on a spinning earth. And really, in the long run, you should be okay with me thinking that too, because I'm not attempting to hurt you over it. I'm not attacking you. I'm not telling you that you have to go to jail. I'm not telling you you now have to die because you don't agree with me. I'm not saying in any way that I'm going to try and negatively affect your life. I'm just going to live my life with the understanding that we don't live on a spinning ball. And it's okay if you live yours with the understanding that we do live on a ball.
So just to
I
put a
totally
bow
accept
on
that,
that,
and you don't need to accept my views at all. But if we're having a discussion about the nature of something, I mean, the point is to try and get to a mutual understanding, is it not?
Oh yeah, but
okay, cool. So if we're talking about something that's unfalsifiable, if we're talking about something that's unfalsifiable, such as stopping the motion of the Earth to be able to detect a deceleration, I think that in some cases, I think in a lot of cases, given a situation that you cannot change, for example, creating a second Earth to measure if mass creates gravity in that respect, something we can't do, there are still other ways that we can measure things to give us a better understanding without having to falsify something directly.
Yes. So
simply just because we can't stop the spinning of the Earth doesn't mean that we can't detect whether there is a rotation. It just means that particular proof that you would require is out of the realms of possibility.
I'm not the one who put forth that standard. You just said we would have to stop the rotation. I think there actually is another way that you could prove it.
Okay.
You could get a
how
ball.
is that?
You could get a ball in a controlled environment and make it spin perpetually without any power or any other source of energy touching it. If you can do that, then we have a perpetual spinning ball, and now I can accept that maybe we're on a spinning ball. And you wouldn't have to create a whole nother Earth or anything. Just show me that happening in nature without any other energy affecting it, and now we have an example of that happening that I can see with my own eyes. But it's not on me to say you have to falsify this to prove it to me. All I'm saying is you can't prove that it is spinning, therefore I don't have a requirement to believe that it is spinning.
Okay, so for example, bringing a globe up to the ISS and starting it spinning, apart from the atmospheric friction that would slow it down eventually, but in a zero-G environment, that ball would continue to spin. I mean, that is something that you can
That's
test.
not showing it to me, though. That's taking it to a place that you claim exists in a place that you claim it is without me being able to independently verify that with any of my senses whatsoever. You would have to show me here on Earth an example in nature of something being able to spin perpetually. Because that's what you're
Unfortunately,
claiming it's doing. You're
the
claiming that
object
the Earth in nature is
the
spinning perpetually.
unfortunately the object you're talking about is sitting in a vacuum. There's no external friction being applied to planet Earth
Right.
in its
But
spin. So
that's not my
that if you want to
problem
create
if
the
you're
same
trying to convince
situation,
me. If you're trying to
yeah,
convince me
but
that it's spinning, it's not my problem that it's too hard to prove that it's spinning.
it's not hard to prove. It's the proof that you require is an impossibility if you don't become an astronaut and go up to the ISS and do it yourself. So you've
If you
put
have other
yourself in a
ways to prove
position
it, I'm
where
open to them,
the
but I would expect
well,
actual proof that's verifiable.
okay, but then that's when we start going back to, do we trust scientific tools until we have a reason not to? So then we can start talking about things like ring laser gyroscopes. We can start talking about pendulums. We can start talking about other types of gyroscopes, which, unless we have a reason to believe they don't work, do show rotation. So this is where we can go back to, can we create a spinning ball in a zero-G environment realistically that to let you physically verify that? No, we can't. But do we have other tools that we can use to show rotation? Yes, we do. And unless there's a reasonable explanation as to why you distrust those tools, then we should trust them until there's a reason not to.
Right. I do have a reason to not trust them.
What if
Which
we
is,
which is that they were made by human beings that I don't know and don't trust for a purpose that they know and I don't know.
okay, I think we established that experts in the field, in certain fields, unless we have expertise or we have a reason to believe that they are being disingenuous, we can quite reasonably defer to their judgment unless we have a reason not to. And what we are is we're talking about experts in the field of physics, experts in the field, in all the different sciences that have created these tools, which they trust and they use to measure a wide variety of things which have incredible utility to us. And if they weren't accurate, they wouldn't have the utility that they do have. So unless it's just you not believing it, unless there's a reason
So
to reasonably not believe
I
it, I
thought
think
I
we should take
clarified
those
it
tools.
earlier. You can do that, but you are not required to do that.
No, I'm not saying we're required to. I'm just saying what's reasonable. And if we're trying to find out the truth based on the limited knowledge that we personally have and deferring to people that have better expertise until we're in a position to have better expertise ourselves, I'm just talking about having the most reasonable understanding of our reality using the best tools available to us.
Right. So I don't agree that that is a reasonable way to determine what reality is, that you say I appeal to this expert and his tool, I think it's accurate, therefore that is what's true. I don't consider that to be reasonable.
I know it's not. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying we defer to that expertise until we have a good reason not to, until we go out
Okay.
and personally
Yeah,
become
no,
an expert in that
I
field, or until we have a reason to not trust those experts or those tools, a reasonable reason not to. I think that that's the best way to understand our reality in the widest way possible, other than just
so
understanding our immediate reality around us.
I might not have clarified earlier well enough to explain what I mean then, because it seems like you're not understanding what I actually think about it. I think that someone can choose to defer to an expert in that case if they want to. As far as a basis or a standard, I think that the only reasonable standard to start from is everyone is on the same level. And if you want someone else to believe what you have to say, you must prove it with verifiable, credible, repeatable evidence. If you insist on someone else taking what you say as accurate, okay? That's what I think. So I don't think that the concept of expert means anything unless you decide personally expert means something. I don't think the concept of scientific tool holds weight unless you personally decide scientific tool holds weight. So you can
Yeah.
choose to do that, but on a base level, the standard should always be what that person says is not the case unless they show that it is the case.
What kind of phone do you use, Dole?
What kind, as in like brand, or
Yeah.
I have an iPhone.
Okay, so because you're able to use and verify that that's a functioning tool, do you trust that Apple knows how electricity works and how wireless communication works and how batteries work and how LCD screens work since you have this demonstration in your hand?
There was several different things there. I trust that they have the ability to put the device together in a way that works.
So you
That's
don't
what
trust
I
that
would
they
trust.
have a basic understanding of the science involved, the electricity, the
Well, now you're getting
magnetism,
say Apple is a
chemical
company.
storage of
Well, a
electricity.
company's not a person, so Apple can't know anything. So somebody at the company understands how to put the thing together to make it work. I agree with that.
Okay, so if you had a question about wireless communications, there would be someone there who could teach you about that you would trust, considering they did it for the phone that you use every day.
No, that is not true. That is not. I would not trust anyone at that company to give me an accurate representation of how wireless technology works.
Hmm,
What I
interesting.
would trust them to do is give me an accurate information on how the phone goes together and does what it does whenever it's in my hand. If that's if that's the field that they're an expert in at the company, then they would be able to show me that.
So you don't think it's necessary for there to be an employee at Apple that understands how to transmit and receive wireless information?
No, they might get their wireless chips from somebody else entirely and just slap it in the phone in the slot that they're supposed to go in. I don't know how to build a graphics card just because I can put the graphics card in my computer. I don't know how how the card draws pixels on a screen. I understand that it does draw pixels on the screen. I don't know how it does that just because I put the graphics card in my machine. So there could be literally not one person at Apple that knows how wireless technology works. They just know they have to put this chip in this
They,
slot and the phone does what it's supposed to.
they make their own processors.
Yeah, processors are not a wireless chip. They're two separate
No,
parts.
it's part of the computer, right? And they have multiple patents for various things.
Patents are not the same as having knowledge of how a thing works.
So
It's
wait,
exactly what a patent shows.
No, a
does
patent is
your
an idea.
phone functionally transmits and receives wireless information? So does that indicate to you that somewhere in the world the knowledge necessary to run that process exists?
Yes.
Okay. So if you have a functional piece of technology that uses some piece of science, then you must admit that the knowledge to produce that technology does exist.
Yes, it exists somewhere. Absolutely.
Okay. So what about that Geiger counter?
What about it?
It's a functional tool that detects radiation, so there must somewhere in the world exist a person who understands enough about radiation and detecting it to make that tool.
Here's the problem with that, okay? The wireless technology that I use, I can verify that it works because I can dial the number and literally talk to someone I know somewhere else. So I'm verifying that that works. When the Geiger counter beeps, I'm not seeing anything or hearing or feeling anything that indicates that radiation is real. There's no way for me to verify that. All I can do is trust the
Well,
tool and that someone's interpretation of beeps equal radiation. See, now I'm relying on someone's interpretation of the beeps.
you
Beeps
could
by themselves don't prove anything.
you could verify it for yourself by having a piece something that is a known source of radiation, something that you
I
know,
could then
something
verify
that
that
you
the
know
tool
is
detects something
yeah.
in that piece, okay?
No,
That would
it
not prove that radiation
no
exists
no.
as claimed and as
Listen,
dangerous as
listen to what
claimed.
I said. Listen to what I said. You know that this thing that you have is a source of radiation, and so then if you use the Geiger counter and it beeps, then that verifies that the Geiger counter works.
The problem with that is that I don't know that the thing is a source of radiation.
Yeah, but you could do that. You could find out. You could get something, and you could determine for yourself that
Well, yeah.
yes, this
If
is
I
a
had-
source of radiation. You could do
If
that.
I had a unicorn detector and then I grabbed a unicorn, I could make sure that the unicorn detector
That's true.
worked.
That's true.
But-
If you had a unicorn, right, and you knew it's a unicorn, and you have a unicorn detector, then you could verify that the unicorn detector works. Yes, you could.
Yeah, that's actually
Right.
good evidence.
The problem is that there's literally no way for me to verify the unicorn exists to begin with to calibrate the tool.
Well, our claim
let's
is
go
that
back.
you can know that. You can
Right.
discover that something is in
My
fact
claim is that you
radioactive.
My
that's,
claim is that
based on
using
what?
the Geiger
Based on
counter
what?
to calibrate the Geiger counter is not a valid way to find truth.
No, but
It's
there's
a way
other
to
ways. Not the Geiger
confirm
counter,
what
but
you already believe.
not the Geiger counter, but the source of radiation. There's a way you can
Yeah,
verify for yourself.
There are multiple ways we can detect radiation outside of a Geiger counter, and that's why we cross-reference different ways to detect radiation. Our understanding
All
of
of them rely
chemical
on you using a tool that is claimed to do that job.
but literally our entire planet and society has been built from relying on tools. So there is a point in which, unless you have
Not
a
all
reason to
tools are
believe that
equal.
tool is not working, then you
Aussie,
should believe
not all
that tool
tools are
is.
equal.
I agree, not all tools are equal, but when we're talking about scientific instruments, unless you have a reason to believe that instrument is malfunctioning because of
not malfunctioning.
everything that's been achieved using these tools and the accuracy that they've shown in the past, you can use past experience to validate future predictions. Doesn't mean it's going to always work. Doesn't mean that tool
Right.
isn't going to be incorrect on some occasions. However, you can use past experienced and past data to make a reasonable prediction on how accurate that tool will be in the future.
And Bob
Right.
Dole,
My
we didn't
past experience
use
is that radiation has never once affected my life, nor has it ever been detected near me, by me,
Yeah.
on me, in me, or around me. That
except-
has never happened. And so I use that experience to determine, until I have verifiable, credible, repeatable evidence that I
Yes.
can sense myself, I am not going to subject myself to the fear of radiation simply
Right.
because somebody else says radiation exists, fear it.
Well, it exists because we used other methods than a Geiger counter to know that it exists. Geiger counters were invented after. Just a second. Geiger counters were invented after we discovered radiation. So we used other means to know that this material that we have is radioactive, and then we developed Geiger counters.
If
If
you
I could
accept
jump
that,
in
that's
for a
fine.
moment.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so for example, if you came to my country, Australia, and you were in the northern part of Australia, and you decided you wanted to go for a bushwalk, I could say to you, be cautious of these particular types of snakes. They're highly aggressive and they could bite you. You don't have to have personally experienced one of these snakes to be cautious of the danger that's presented.
Right.
Oh, Bob Dole
So
says
that's the
he
same
does.
thing with
but
that's the same thing with radiation. Just because you haven't personally experienced radiation doesn't mean you don't need to be cautious, because other people have very good reason to say to you this particular thing could be hazardous to your health because of past experiences and past data and past I guess
Those things are not
experimentation
analogous.
or
I've experienced
they're
wild
directly
animals.
analogous.
Believe that wild animals exist. I've never experienced invisible things harming me without me ever being able to detect them physically. It's never happened.
have you been out in a strong wind before?
Yes.
Okay, so that's something you can't see but can harm you.
Not see, feel. 5 senses. I said cannot detect. We have 5 ways to detect things. I've never had something invisible that I cannot detect in any way harm me.
I have a
So
question on that.
you've never had a virus of any sort. You've never caught the flu or a cold.
You can detect those.
After you've been infected, yes, but prior to being infected, you can't. The same with radiation. You can detect what happens to your body after you've been irradiated, but you can't detect it beforehand.
Okay, but
It's exactly
I've
analogous.
think about what you just said. After I've gotten the cold, I can detect it, right? So
Okay,
then
and now that
right
you've had a
now, I
cold, if
would
someone
know that colds exist. I've never been infected with radiation, so right now I'm not in the position to say, "Oh, I feel the after effects of radiation, so it must exist." If that happens, I have no problem saying, "Oh, radiation must exist." But until that happens, I'm not going to believe it exists.
that's an
I mean,
incredibly dangerous way to live if you're not going to learn the lessons of other
Well,
people's
dangerous for me,
experiences.
perhaps, but it doesn't hurt you. I'm okay living with that danger.
Bob Dole, have you ever had an X-ray?
Yes.
Okay, so they fired something through your body that you weren't able to feel or detect, but then you got to see your bones. So they
I got to see the
demonstrated to you,
result of it.
yeah, so they demonstrated to you that they fired something through your body that you could not feel with any of your senses, but it was
Yep.
there and it had a functional purpose, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And did they also warn you that it was irradiating?
Something along those
They
lines.
put a
Yeah.
lead
They put
apron over you. They put a
a
lead
lead
apron
a
over you.
exact.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
So even given that experience, don't you think it's reasonable to believe that there are invisible rays that can go through your body that you can't feel or detect, but really exist because it was demonstrated in front of you?
Yes, those ones that demonstrated me, I do think actually exist. I think X-rays are real. I think that they do
Okay.
exist.
Okay. So it's not a big leap to other forms of radiation from there, right?
It is a leap, though.
Still a
Why?
leap.
I'm not saying that radiation can't exist. I think X-rays do exist. If that's a form of radiation, that's fine. What I'm saying is I don't believe that it exists. I'm not willing to bet my life on it or change my actions based on just that claim alone that would somehow negatively affect my life. So it's not useful information until I know that it's accurate or that it's true in this scenario. Because as far as my experience is concerned in my life, I've literally never had to deal with radiation. So why would I spend my time believing that it exists when it's never been shown to me to exist and it isn't affecting my life?
I thought you said it
So
was shown to you to exist.
X-rays have been, and I believe that they exist. Sure.
X-rays
Okay,
are
Or
can I just jump
radiation.
whatever
in?
they claim
The
X-rays
real
are, that thing must exist because they showed me my bones, right?
so the real Bob Dole. Have you ever been shot by a firearm?
No, not
Do you
well,
believe
not a real one.
guns are
No.
dangerous?
What's
No.
that?
Do you believe that firearms can be dangerous to your health?
By them, not by themselves.
Okay, do you believe getting shot by a firearm could be hazardous to your health?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so somebody that something you haven't personally experienced, but other
I
people
have
have
personally
demonstrated
experienced.
and told you about. So you've been shot.
No, no. Think about what you're asking me. If
Okay, so
I have felt
you haven't
something
seen the
foreign,
result of radiation burns in
if I have
anybody.
felt something foreign enter my body and tear flesh, that means I've experienced being shot because that's what being shot leads to. So I know from experience that letting a foreign object tear my flesh and enter my body will be painful and possibly hazard my health. I have experienced that firsthand and could feel it. I don't need to have the exact experience of the gunfire to know that an object entering my flesh could be painful.
I'm just curious. Let's say it's not a matter of life and death. Let's say somebody asked you if you thought radiation exists, and if you guessed right, they'd give you $1 million. Which one would you guess?
Any radiation in any form whatsoever
Harmful radiation.
is okay. Well, the question would be: is X-rays included in that? Are X-rays considered radiation?
Let's say nuclear radiation.
Nuclear radiation.
Yeah.
If they asked me right now, I had to guess: does nuclear radiation? Are we? So that's an interesting question. I would say some type of nuclear radiation, or what could be called nuclear radiation, does exist. I think that's true because if nuclear components like plutonium exist and you mess with them in a certain way, I do think they can generate energy. That seems to be reasonable that that would take place and could be considered radiation in of itself because like fire radiates heat, right? So when you're talking about the word radiation like that, I would say yes. I do not think that nuclear radiation necessarily exists in the way that they claim it does.
I don't understand that clarification, I guess.
Yeah, I don't understand that either.
I think
What
that
other way
nuclear
could it
radiation
exist?
can exist in the form of energy, and that it can do things energy-wise. I do not necessarily believe that nuclear radiation just how would you so like the claim that like somebody drops a bomb and it creates nuclear radiation that it causes your skin to fall off and you get cancer or you mutate an arm or whatever. I don't think that that's real. I have no reason to think that's real. It's never been demonstrated to me. I've never seen it.
It's
The
been
only thing
demonstrated.
I have information about that
It's been
on is old
demonstrated, though.
videos that look. What's that?
It's been demonstrated.
Not to me. To someone maybe, sure, and that's fine if they
It
agree
seems
with
like
that.
it seems like your principles are really flexible.
And what do you mean? I don't think that I've contradicted myself.
Okay, but just real quickly, Bob Dole. Sorry, Brenda, for busting in here. But if I gave you a lead case and inside I said there's a bar of radium, would you be happy opening up that lead case and handling that bar of radium?
I'm not sure what radium is. Is that something that's supposed to be like dangerous?
It's a radioactive element.
Okay.
So you would be completely confident in handling that until you'd personally been damaged by radiation.
No. My experience in life would tell me that if I don't know about a thing enough and somebody else indicates that it is dangerous, that
like I said, your principles are
I don't have
flexible.
any what's that?
Your principles
No,
are
no,
flexible.
no,
You
it's
only
not.
just
hold
being
them
cautious.
when it's useful to you to hold them
If you let me
in a
explain what I'm
conversation.
saying, it's not a matter of flexibility, Brenda. It's a matter of context. If my child's life depended on me opening that case, I would do it. If I have literally nothing to gain, I would not do it. It's a matter of context. What I wouldn't
Okay,
have
I
the right
said
to
to
do
you,
is
I'll
to
give you
have someone
$100 if
else
you open
grab.
that case and handle that radium.
What's that?
If I said to you, I'll give you $100 to open that case and handle that radium.
No, I wouldn't do it. If
Based
that's
on what?
the only stake, then no, I would not do it.
Flexible
I guess
principles, very flexible.
I'm kind of curious about, is there any way you could clarify your epistemology on this? Like, what is it that leads you to the decision about whether to believe or not believe something? There's evidence for all of the things that we've named here today, and I'm not sure how
So
your decision making process works.
you want to know how I would decide to believe something?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So that would depend. Well, boy, believe. No, that wouldn't depend. Whether or not I was willing to act on something.
Believe is just holding something to be true or exist.
Your
That's not
actions are
accurate.
based on your beliefs generally. So, I mean, you can use either word
Okay,
interchangeably.
so we had this discussion the other night, and I don't know if you guys were here, but I don't think that believe just means hold something to be true. I think that's what a fact is.
You're
Believe,
wrong on that though. That's what
right.
belief means. If
I'm not
if you
wrong,
look it
though,
up,
and
you'll
I
find
know
out.
that I'm not wrong. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
let's
are
not
wrong.
get tied up in semantics.
Understanding of the
How
word
do you
believe.
determine to you what is true?
What is true? By using one or more of my five senses to verify that it's true. That's how I would determine if something is true or not.
And what about things that can't be detected by your five senses, such as radiation, that we need to use separate
Then
tools
it
that
will
we know things exist
right.
that we can't physically feel, see, or touch or smell? We know those things exist. How do you verify that without using those senses?
I don't verify those things, and I don't attempt to. If there's literally no way to detect it with one of the five senses, I don't attempt to verify that it's real. I have no
Okay,
business or reason to.
so why would you not pick up that bar of radium that just looks like a piece of metal? All of your five senses tells you it's perfectly safe.
No, they don't tell me that. They don't tell me anything at all about it. So I'm in the dark on
Okay,
it. I wouldn't
so
know
it
about
just looks like a piece of metal.
Right. I've been
So
told
what would you base your what would make you think that's dangerous, other than every other piece of metal that you know empirically isn't dangerous and that you would have no problem picking up or touching? What would make you look at that particular piece of metal and think that is something I wouldn't touch?
people that I know and trust have indicated to me that it's possible it could be dangerous. That's how I would determine whether or not I'd pick it up.
So there are things outside of your five senses that you use to tell what is real and what's not.
No, not
Just to
tell
make a
what is real and
decision.
what's not, to tell what is pragmatic or useful
Exactly.
enough or not. Just because I decide to pick up
Just
the bar or
wisdom.
not pick up the bar does not in and of itself indicate that I believe something to be true about it.
Yeah, it kind of
I
does. It
understand
kind
there's
of
a
does.
possibility it's true, and so why take the risk?
Right.
Yeah, it's
So
just erring on the side of caution.
you do have flexible principles then.
That's not a principle that is flexible. That's
So
called caution. That's not a flexible principle. If you don't
Common
understand how
sense,
context
caution.
works, you
They're
have no
flexible
business being in the
principles.
conversation, Brenda. You don't seem to understand what context means. Context will change how a situation is interpreted. That's how it works.
Yeah,
I think we
flexible
decided that
principles.
there
No,
are certain ways that you could um, verify that things exist outside of your senses, like when we were talking about wireless communications, right? You can't see
right?
that or touch that, but you have a device that you know functions on that principle. So you have
Yes,
trust in that
you're
principle.
verifying by using the device. The device works.
And
You press the numbers, press send. It does call someone, and you can talk to them. You can hear them with your sense. So you
yeah,
verified with one or more of your five senses that it does work.
no, but you weren't able to verify that there's a wireless communication going on with one of your senses.
You don't need.
You're using a man-made device to demonstrate the principle. So there are some cases
Right.
where a man-made device can demonstrate to you that something that you can't sense is real.
Well, okay, no. So I wouldn't claim to you that I know that those signals are real or that I can point to them and identify them. I would say I know that the phone works. Here, watch me use it.
So you right
I
now
wouldn't
here
make the
today would
claim that
not
you're stating.
claim.
I wouldn't do that.
So right now you would not claim that wireless communications exist.
I would claim that wireless communications, as they state it is, seems to work, but I will
Now,
not claim for sure that it's real.
so where's that skepticism coming from? What rationale do you have to not quite trust that they know what they're talking about?
It's not a matter of them not knowing what they're talking about. It's a matter of understanding the nature of human beings and their um, predilection to say things or do things that will benefit them personally rather than say and do things that will benefit humanity as a whole in a positive or good way. People will, for example, lie if it will benefit them here and now, even though a lie, no matter who it's told to or told by or for whatever reason, a lie is always ultimately negative for humanity. Lies actually hold us back as a human race. But people will lie in the moment in an attempt to get a momentary or temporary leg up in some way. So, no, I won't trust someone that wireless communication is absolutely real as stated, but I will trust someone if they put a phone in my hand and they say, Here, look, it works. And then suddenly I hear my mom, who is miles away, on the phone. Now they've
So,
given me a actual real example I can detect with one or more of my five senses.
so you're skeptical because you believe that there could be an ulterior motive for someone to lie about the functional mechanism behind wireless communication.
Oh, absolutely. Someone can lie about
What
anything
reason? What reason do you have to believe that that's even if they even have an incentive to do that?
because human beings lie. People lie.
Yeah. Just the knowledge
I
of
mean,
the
And you
nature
just
of a man.
that's what people
so
do.
that
People lie. Like that's just a thing.
so that's kind of your foundation. You're gonna assume everybody's lying unless they what?
I'm not, well, I guess it depends on how you mean that. I don't go through life thinking there's a China man right now somewhere in China that's lying about something. I mean, I couldn't possibly identify every human and say each one is individually a liar. What I'm going to do is, as I stated before, the things that I experience myself in my life, I will continue to think are true because that's the experience and evidence that I have until someone comes along and verifies or shows me in a verifiable way that it is not true or that something else is true.
What does that mean? What does verifiable way mean?
Verifiable means that you can detect it with one or more of your 5 senses. That's verifiable. That's the only way you can verify something.
Interesting. So
Can't
your
verify
default position is that people are either mistaken or lying to you until
No.
you can verify it yourself.
My default position is if they say something that is contrary to my evidence, they are wrong until they prove that they're true or that they're right.
What about if you don't have any evidence and they tell you
If I
something?
don't have any evidence, then I would have no reason not to go along with it as long as the stakes are not too high.
Well,
So
then
if
you
I don't
have-
have any evidence either way on the rock, but my life's
So by not,
my child's life depends on it, now
so
there's
by
stakes.
not, so by
Okay,
not
so
going
going-
along with it, you're assuming that person's either lying or mistaken.
No, not unless I have contrary evidence.
That's what I just said.
Oh, maybe I missed it. If they have contrary, or if they don't have any contrary evidence to what I have, then I'm not going to believe them. Why would I?
So going back to the Geiger counter example, what contrary evidence do you have to believe that works?
Exactly.
The fact that
This
I
is-
have literally never detected or experienced any type of radiation in my entire life that I
But
can't detect.
But a lack of evidence is not evidence.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You're saying a lack of evidence is evidence to you. You're saying you've
No,
never
no, no.
detected it before.
I would be saying
but
that
you're-
if I was claiming it absolutely doesn't exist. Then I would be saying lack of evidence. I'm not saying that. I clarified this earlier. I'm not saying radiation absolutely doesn't exist. What I'm saying is I'm not going to live as if it does in my everyday life just because somebody claims that it exists.
But what evidence do you have that Geiger counter doesn't work?
You can't prove a positive. You don't have evidence of things not existing or not working like that. That's not how it works. If you want to prove that it works, you have to prove the positive. I have no obligation to prove a negative.
Yeah, you
But
can prove
you just told us that you accept things unless you have a reason to not accept them.
Right. I have a reason to not
So
accept
what's your reason to not accept it?
My reason to not accept it is that I have no experience with it, just like the unicorn. If someone tells me a unicorn exists, I say no. In my entire experience, my whole life, I've seen animals. I've never once seen a unicorn. So if you want to make the positive claim that unicorns do exist, it's your obligation to prove that they do. It is not my obligation to prove that they don't.
But you said you've had an X-ray, so you know radiation exists, and you know that
I
it can
know that
exist
X-rays
without
exist.
being able to
It's
detect it.
your claim that that's radiation. It's not my claim.
What reason do you have to believe it's not radiation?
I don't have a reason to not believe that.
So then you don't
I
have a
don't
reasonable reason to
I don't
believe
have a
that it's
reason either
not.
way. I
You
don't
just
have a
said you would
person telling you
accept
that
it
it
unless
is
you have a
lying,
reason to
mistaken.
not believe it. And I'm just saying,
Okay.
what reason do you have to not believe that that is radiation? Because your comment was, I will accept it unless I have a reason not to believe it.
No, I don't mind accepting it if I don't have a reason not to believe it. I don't absolutely accept something just because I don't have contrary evidence. That's where a choice comes in. You can choose, or one of the choices, you can choose to not believe something whether you have evidence or not. That's just something someone can do at any time.
You seem to say absolutely.
But now you're contradicting yourself in saying that I will accept something unless I have a reason not to, but now you're saying you're just choosing not to, regardless
I
of
will
evidence.
accept something if I have no reason not to from someone I trust. I clarified that earlier. From somebody I trust.
Yeah, but then why not accept that a Geiger counter works? Because the people that
I
are telling you it
nobody that
works
built a Geiger
are
counter is
experts in
someone
the
I know
field.
and trust. If my dad came to me and said that he built a Geiger counter and I was aware that he had spent his life studying radiation and knew what it was and knew all the details about it, and he told me he built a device that can detect it and then he demonstrated it to me, I would trust him that that thing is accurate.
Oh,
And it would be
okay.
the
So all I
exact
have
same
to do is show you a
situation
video of a
that he
nuclear
had.
physicist explaining how a Geiger counter works.
You
And then you'll be
appealing
fine.
to the authority of nuclear physicists doesn't mean anything to me. You think that holds
see?
weight or value. I don't.
Hold on.
Flexible-
Didn't
flexible
we
principle.
establish
Very
earlier, though,
flexible.
that you will accept the authority of someone who is an expert in the field unless you have a reason not to, if you're not an expert in that field yourself? We
I
established
did
that
not
earlier, that
say
it is
that I would
reasonable
accept. I
to...
said that I could accept. You are allowed to accept. You can accept that if you choose to trust them You can do that. You are not
Why would you
required.
choose not to?
It's just whenever he feels like it. That's all. It's just whenever he feels like
Why
it.
would I choose not to trust somebody?
Why would you choose not to trust a nuclear physicist on whether a Geiger counter works or not? What would be your decision making? What reasonable decision would you make to not trust them?
If they lied to me, or I knew that something that they said or believed was not accurate, and that they decided to live their life based on that, or if I know this person, I would know whether or not I trust them. That's how you get to know, or that's how you get to know if you trust someone or not. Is you get to know them.
But you don't
So
have to know a pilot to trust what they say about aircraft.
you don't have to know anybody to trust them. That's a personal decision.
That's
I'm
my
not
whole
making
point.
a claim for somebody else. You don't have to do any of that.
Yeah, flexible
You
That's
principle.
the point, man.
Very
Yeah, we're
flexible.
not saying you
can
have to. I'm
decide
just
We're
trying to
trying to
work
get-
out how you decide.
It's just whenever he feels like it. It's completely irrational.
Trying to get down to how you make that personal decision.
I told you already. It's based on context.
So it changes just depending on whim. Is that correct?
Not when. That it's not a matter of like time factor specifically. It's a matter of what is the situation surrounding it. So there
But
are
there's
certain
plenty of
things that do
situations
matter
where
and
you
don't
can just be watching a video by a nuclear physicist explaining how a Geiger counter works, where
Okay.
there's absolutely no reason not to trust that person.
You say there's no reason not to trust that person. In
We're
your
trying to
example,
get to the bottom of how you decide whether or not they're trustworthy.
that would involve me knowing them and finding out whether or not they are trustworthy.
What
But
about
then again,
airplane
that's my
pilots?
point. You don't need to know a pilot to trust what they say about aircraft.
I don't know a pilot, and I don't trust what they say about aircrafts.
So you
Like,
don't
Bob,
trust a pilot's opinion
I've
on
never
aircraft.
experienced that.
I'm really curious, Bob.
That's
do you
his
believe
default
in-
position.
Do you
Like I was
believe
saying
in
before.
Do you believe in degrees of certainty or levels of confidence, or is it 100% yes or 100% no?
Um,
Well, if it's his dad, then it's 100% yes, right?
no, that's not an absolute. That would be if I told you, if I understood that that's a thing that he had done his entire life. You seem to be rejecting the concept of personal trust in somebody. That's not an objective
Not at all.
thing.
That's
You're
not
aware
what
of
we're
that,
doing.
right?
No, we're not rejecting that.
No. That's not what we're doing at all.
Okay,
We're
all right.
trying to ascertain how you decide whether or not you defer to someone's opinion on something. We're trying to get a definite answer on that, and it seems to be it depends
But
on
he
how you
told you it's
feel about that
personal.
person.
Oh yes, absolutely. Whether or not you defer to somebody without like one of the five senses, if you're going to take the five senses out of the equation and say, do you defer to this person or not? It is absolutely 100% personal and based on whatever your biases, feelings, personal conceptions, all of those things. It is not in any way an objective decision if you take out the five senses. And I never claimed otherwise. So if that's what you're trying to get to, I have no problem admitting that. If you remove the five
So it's
senses
based
from the
on whim.
equation, it is absolutely, yes, 100% it's based on whim. If you remove the
Okay,
five senses,
so
it
Yeah,
literally
there we
can't be
go.
anything
And
but whim.
there we
no,
go.
that's okay. No, but that's okay. Then we've got a definitive answer. That's fine.
Yeah.
If you base whether you believe something on whim and not any sort of set guidelines, that's okay. I mean, you've been
I
honest
didn't say
about it.
believe,
That's
though.
fine. We've gotten to the
I
bottom
didn't say
of it.
believe. I disagree with the word believe if you're going to insert believe there. I didn't say believe. You're saying take
Okay,
something.
trust. Take someone's word on something. But if it changes depending on your feeling, then that's fine.
Yes, trust is based absolutely on feeling. You literally don't base it on anything else if you take away five senses. You can't base
Okay,
it on
so
anything else.
well, that's where we differ. I tend to defer to people with better expertise in areas that I have less expertise in until I
Right.
have a reason not to.
But that's
It doesn't come down to how I feel
that's
about the
feeling
person.
that you have. That has nothing to do with the five senses. Therefore, it is not something objective. It's subjective. You subjectively decide that that is a good enough standard, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's bad or anything. What I'm saying is that is something that you subjectively decided. That is not an objective decision that you just made.
Well, it's an objectively better decision than
You can't prove that in
the
any way
opposite.
that's verifiable, credible, and repeatable. So that
No, that's
claim
not
is
true, though.
automatically not important. The claim
We
he
went over
just
that
made
already.
is not verifiable, repeatable, and credible.
Yeah, it is.
We went
That it is
over how those
objectively
are not the
better. You would have
criteria
to be
that
able
you
to show that, and you can't.
But we know those aren't your criteria. We went over that.
Yes, they are.
I think the point here is your position just isn't rationally coherent.
Correct.
I don't know of any particular place that I've contradicted myself.
Well, that's a result of you being rationally incoherent.
Can you point to the part where
Yeah, you didn't contradict yourself at all.
Can you point to the part where I contradicted myself? I can try and clarify, or perhaps change the way I explained it to make it, more easily understandable or more logical. Which
Well,
part am I contradicting on? I'm saying
think
if you have 5 senses, that's something objective, and you can show somebody that. If you take away 5 senses, literally every decision that doesn't involve one of the, or more of the 5 senses is subjective. It cannot be objective if it's not based on one or more of the 5 senses. It can't be. It has to be based on interpretation, feeling, personal bias, all of those things. The only things we can use for objective interpretations or decisions would be one or more of the 5 senses.
Which aren't interpretable.
You don't need to interpret them. They're
no
senses.
kidding.
If you
Oh,
drop a
that's
ball, you
interesting.
watch it drop. There's no interpretation required. Your eyes did all of the interpreting for you. You watch the ball drop. If you require interpretation, now you have to deal in something that is not objective. Do you trust the person or not? That choice is not objective. It is subjective, and it will always be subjective.
I'm just gonna say I don't think you have a functional epistemology that's gonna lead you to discerning reality from imagination.
Yeah,
Pretty much
and
all I got on
senses
this.
That's fine.
senses
I'm
are
okay with that.
literally definitionally subjective.
It seems functional because it doesn't seem, if it's not functional, then I'm not alive right now, right? It must be functional because I'm alive, I'm happy, my life is going extremely well, I'm here talking to you, I'm able to communicate with other people. So it must be functional because I'm functioning. If it wasn't functional, I'd be dead, right?
No, lots of irrational people exist.
Well, whatever it is their system is must be functional. The question isn't whether or not something is functional. If that was the question, then I would just believe anything anyone told me as long as it was functional. That's not a good way to live. What I'm determined to find out is the thing good? Is it truth? Is it reality?
Yeah,
Not, is
functional
it
is just an
functional?
arbitrary word you chose to describe and comport with or conflate with being alive.
What word is?
Like there's lots of irrational people that are alive, and they're still irrational. They still make poor decisions.
You said that what was the word you used? Epistemology? It's not functional?
No, Phil said that.
Oh, okay. Then that's who I was responding to, if that's who said it.
I think it all kind of came around to my very first question, which it was, if everybody used the same epistemology as you, do you think we would have progressed as a people whatsoever?
There's no way that anyone on Earth could possibly have the right experiment or data to determine whether or not we would have done that. Like, there's no way to test for that, where we would be if thousands of years of history were different. How would I possibly come up with an answer for that? You can't do it.
Well, I would say that there's no chance telephones would exist. Our
That's like asking me
telecommunications would
if the
not
sun
exist
wasn't
based on the
giving
synthetic
us
method.
light and instead was giving us something else entirely, how would history change? I have no idea.
The point is, at some level, for the advancement of our civilization, the people now that are doing research now have a certain level of trust in the people that came before them that they never met.
Yeah.
And we don't. Every generation does not need to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch, and that's what he's getting at. Is that we wouldn't be where we are if we used your mindset.
That's entirely possible. I'm not saying that wouldn't be the case, and I'm not saying that every generation that I'm going to insist that they reinvent the wheel. I will not make that claim.
Mm-hmm. I know it's easy.
I guess
It's
you're
easy
just very
to
fortunate
stay as
to live
vague as
in a
possible.
world where people don't have that. Yeah,
It's not vague.
you're
It's a matter of
experiencing
not
the fruits.
insisting.
Sorry for talking over you. My apologies.
I'm not going to insist on somebody else taking my point of view simply because I enjoy my point of view and my point of view works for me. I'm not going to insist that somebody else take that also. They don't have to.
Well, when did you reinvent the wheel?
I never did, and I never claimed that I was going to.
So you're not consistent in how you apply your principles.
If that is the way you see it, that's perfectly fine. I don't see where I've contradicted myself. If you do, point it out, and maybe I can explain it better, maybe I can't, I don't know. But I don't see any way that I've contradicted myself. If you have five senses and you can show something with one or more of them, it's objective. If you take those away and show it in any other way that doesn't involve those senses, then it's subjective. I mean, if you have something
that's
that shows me
wrong.
that's wrong,
Our senses
then
are
tell me.
subjective. Subjective means that it is my opinion.
Dependent on the mind.
Dependent on
Senses
me.
are not
That's
opinion.
my senses. My senses are necessarily subjective.
No, they aren't.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, they are.
You just have words wrong. This is what they mean, and when you reverse things, that makes things very confusing. Subjective means it's dependent on my opinion, my personal subjective
Senses are
experience.
not dependent on your opinion.
Yeah,
Whether or not you see something is not dependent on your opinion.
No.
It's dependent on your eyes, not
no,
you.
that's not true. So, if I experience chocolate ice cream, tastes wonderful to me, or I love jazz music, that's subjective, not objective.
That's right, it is. But we're not talking about hearing it. We're talking about how you have decided to interpret it.
Hearing is a
It
sense.
doesn't
We're
change
talking about the
fact that your ears
senses.
heard it.
Hearing
If
is
you
a sense, and
Brendan's
taste
saying.
is a
love
sense.
jazz music but have never heard it, then you're being dishonest.
No, hearing is a
Think
sense.
about an optical illusion.
What's that?
Think about an optical illusion. You
What
see
about it?
something that's You see something that's still, but it looks like it's moving. Or you see straight lines that are bent.
Mm-hmm.
It's a subjective interpretation. You don't know that what you're getting from your senses is reality.
Okay.
So
And?
it's subjective. It's not objective. It's the opposite of it.
No, it is objective. You are seeing that thing.
No,
You're seeing
But
that
you're-
picture. What it's
You're
doing,
seeing
what
it
the
to
picture
move
is
and it's
doing
still.
is your interpretation. But it does not change the fact that you are literally seeing that picture.
Your senses
are
are
detecting it with your eyes.
interpretation. You don't have senses without interpretation. There's no such thing as hearing without your interpretation of what you hear.
Okay, so that must be a point of contention or disagreement then. I think that you can have your senses without interpretation. I think if I hear a bird, whether or not I think the bird sounds good or not does not come into play in determining whether or not I heard the bird to begin with. I don't think I need to interpret the fact that sound
Well,
entered my
Yeah,
ears.
how do you know you heard the bird?
The conversation's going beyond the original
Right.
hearing the bird.
You heard the bird whether you like it or not. There's no interpretation required to know that you did hear the
No,
bird.
I heard a sound that I interpret to be a bird.
Okay, yes, I can accept that. You heard a sound. The assumption was that we knew it was a bird. We don't have to assume that. You're right. If we don't assume that, then the objective information you have is that you heard something. Yes.
You ever been half asleep and hear like just one more sentence from your dream while you're awake? And it seems like you really heard it and you're awake, but you heard something that's not there. That ever happen to you?
Not that I can remember particularly. I have had where I wake up and like my eyes are open and it's dark, so but I think that something's falling on me, but then like I come to my senses and like I obviously nothing's falling on me. But I don't know that I've ever heard something after I woke up.
Well, do you ever
From a
hear
dream.
things, you see things in your dreams?
What was that?
Do you ever hear or see things in your dreams?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Like,
So that just absolutely means it's a subjective thing because those things don't exist. You didn't actually hear or see anything.
no, you didn't have. I didn't disagree with that. No, that's not physical reality though. That's not.
Exactly.
I mean, kind of like
exactly
a video
the point.
game.
Yeah, that's the point. They're subjective.
But you are. I don't know what is the point there. That's not
Senses
reality.
are
Dreams
subjective.
aren't reality. Dreams are subjective. Senses aren't though.
So senses are not simply receptors. So you receive
Yes,
the
they are.
input.
That's literally what they are. That's what a sense is. It is a sense.
Well, without the ability, you can receive the input, but your brain must interpret it, right? That is the full architecture of a sense, not just the receptor.
Your brain might need to interpret it as the thing that you sensed, but that's not you interpreting it. Those are two separate things.
No. When we speak senses, that this is all encompassing receiving the stimulus and then interpreting the stimulus.
Yeah, your
Those are two
ears
different
don't
things.
hear. Your brain
No,
hears.
they're
Your
not two
ears
different
don't
things.
hear.
Yeah, they are. The
Oh,
sense is the sense. What you do with the information is entirely subjective. That's on you. That's you doing something with it.
well,
You
I
can
mean,
decide if you like the sound or don't like the sound.
the dictionary definition of sense is a faculty by which the body perceives an external stimulus.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It receives the external stimulus, whether you
Perceives,
like
right?
it or not. Yes.
Perceives
Yes. Senses it. Yes.
the body, right?
The body. Yes.
So how do you perceive a sound? When we say perceive, right, there's a bit more to it than, well, a sound hit my eardrums.
Right. Your brain has to get the information that something hit your eardrums, and then it says that sound.
So what do we call the process after the sound hits your eardrum? What is that?
The process of what exactly? Specifically, what are you referring to?
Well, the rest of the world uses the word sense and defines it differently than you are. That it's the
so
whole process
maybe
of
I'm not
a
defining it.
stimulus.
Okay.
Hmm?
Yeah, maybe that's accurate. Maybe I'm not defining it in the same way that you are. Maybe we're discussing something different. I'm talking about the act of I put my hand on something, I feel it. That is a sense.
What if the nerves in your body didn't translate the sensation to your brain?
Then the sense is broken. You can't use that sense to sense. Like if it doesn't ever get there, then
Well,
you don't
then,
feel
if getting there is part of being a sense, then you must agree that experiencing the stimulus and then interpreting it are one and the same as far as calling it a sense.
So
the full system, mate.
It's possible I used the wrong word getting there. I have no indication that it takes time for the finger to touch something and then your brain recognizes it as touch. I don't know that that's that there's a time factor there. All I know is that I put my hand on something and I can feel it instantly. Like there's no perceptible time between me touching and me feeling. Like
I don't know why time is the sticking point here.
Besides the point.
Well, you're talking to a sea lion.
You said it seemed like you honed in on the word get there or the phrase get there. So it's possible that I just used the wrong phrase. I have no indication that there's a time lapse between you having the sense and then the signal, like a signal being sent to your brain and then the brain taking time to interpret it. There's no indication that that's the way that it works. There's only indication that the sense happens and you know what it was.
How do you know the sense happens?
Because it was sensed.
How was it sensed?
With one of your five senses. You smelled it, touched it, tasted it.
You smelled it, and then what? How did you know that you smelled something?
Because you smell it. The same way I know if I touch something. If someone bumps me, they touch me. I sense the touch, so I know I've been touched.
But that requires your brain to interpret whatever the stimulus, right?
No, there's no interpretation. It's just you were touched. Like I don't think that there's any interpretation happening there. It's that the senses were activated. Whatever happens whenever you sense something, that took place, and so now you know you've been touched.
Well, how do you know?
Because
if you remove the part of the brain that the eyeballs connect to, how do you know what you're seeing? How can you see anything? How do your eyes work then? Your eyes are still working.
Yeah, they're still receiving light.
I have no indication that removing eyes from the head or the brain would still result in eyes working and someone like that doesn't sound like a scenario that's real to me. Do you have an example of that taking place, removing a sense from somebody and having it still operate in exactly the same way?
Well, what do you mean by operate? Because by your definition, it's just the stimulus being received
Can you chop
physically.
off someone's hand and take it across town and give it a high five and that person knows they've been touched?
Well, you can go blind from brain damage without getting any eye damage.
Yeah, the sense of sight is.
Okay, I've never had that happen. If that's true, then that's interesting.
They
Have
wouldn't
you ever?
feel the high five because the hand's been removed from the system.
Yeah.
What was that?
They wouldn't feel the high five because the hand has been removed from the system.
Okay. So you don't have an example of that actually taking place where you remove the sense from the body and it still works.
Have an example of it not working.
Have you ever met a blind person?
I don't know. I'm not.
You don't know if you've ever met a blind person?
Not that I remember.
Okay. Do you need to have met a blind person to discuss blind people?
No, to discuss? No, you don't need to know anything to discuss anything.
Sure. Okay. Do blind people have eyeballs?
As far as I know, they do.
Mm-hmm.
Why would
Does light reach a blind person's eyeballs?
I don't know.
You don't know whether light reaches a blind person's eyeballs?
I mean, if their eyes are open, I would think that it reaches at least the outer part of the eyeball.
Oh,
that makes sense.
Yeah, that would make sense if I'm referencing somebody's eyeballs, that they would be open in my example.
Yeah, but
right?
I would think that they reach the outside of the eyeball. I don't know how far light would go into the eyeball.
But that does mean that the eyeball received light, right?
No, that means that light touches the eyeball, not that it receives light.
Mm-hmm.
If a football hits me in the face, I didn't receive the football.
I mean, now we're just playing semantics.
Well, it's
light. How does
light might
because
hit the
light
eye,
only needs to touch the eye, right? Light has to be enters through the pupil and hits the back.
But it might not do that. If they're blind, I don't know if it's doing that. That might be why they're not seeing. Maybe the light doesn't go to the back of their eye.
Oh.
I don't
Wait
know why.
a minute. Are there not examples of people copying trauma to the head and not damaging their eyes, but they can't see?
I would have no way to verify that there's no damage to their eyes.
I've got trauma right now.
So you just don't know anything at all, then.
He's a sea lion. He's a sea lion. He's a sea lion.
Fine.
Yeah. Light doesn't reach blind people's eyeballs, right? Because that's the only requirement to see, right? The sense of sight is for light to reach your eyeballs. Doesn't have anything to do with how the brain interprets it after the fact, right?
That's a claim that I'm sure is made, is that light hits the eyeballs and that's how we see. I don't know that that's true, but maybe.
And these are words that I'm using to speak to you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something I'm supposed to be picking up on?
I don't think you pick up on it now.
Okay.
So here's the entire point of everything we've been talking about from my point of view. The shape of the Earth is the most demonstrable fact that has ever existed. There could not possibly be more evidence for the shape of the Earth. Yet your epistemology has not led you to hold that truth, which means that you have a flawed epistemology. Something is wrong with how you determine reality from imagination. So you might
I'm
want to
okay
just
with
take a look at that.
that assessment, but you just stated an opinion.
Nope, those are all facts. Those are true things.
They might be facts, but that doesn't mean that they're not opinion or that they're not something that you think yourself that can't be verified. You can't verify that it is the most demonstrable thing in the whole world.
You can't verify those were words that you used, Phil.
I don't need to. I'm not trying to convince anyone that they were.
I think
I
this
was
is
You only
talking to
need
you
to
though.
demonstrate
like
something if you're trying to convince someone.
the most sea lion I've ever met.
Yeah, no
If I
kidding.
was trying to convince you that they were words, then I would need to demonstrate that they were words. I'm not trying to convince you of that. If I'm not trying to convince you of something, I have no obligation to demonstrate it or verify it in any way to you.
Did anybody disagree with what I said?
No, I'd agree. The shape of the Earth is just massively proved through multiple lines of evidence.
That's not what he said. He said it is the most demonstrable thing in the universe.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
so
the
that's
oldest scientific
Yeah.
endeavor of anything. We've
That's
been
an opinion.
investigating. That's where the science came from.
it's funny how you key in on that part to dispute rather than the objective fact that Earth's a globe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's disputable. Saying that
Why?
it is the most demonstrable, that's an opinion.
Yeah, but it's a waste of time to really discuss because the
That's
point, the most
also an
important piece
opinion.
of that
Saying it's a
sentence,
waste of time.
the most important piece of that sentence was that Earth's a
I didn't
globe,
say it was the most
objectively.
important piece. That's your words. I
But
said
no, that's
that's an
how
opinion.
normal people communicate, right?
If that's how normal people communicate in your opinion, that's fine.
Well, if these are words that you're using to talk with,
Yes.
I don't
I think
know.
they're words
I'm not
that I'm
sure
using
that
to
they
talk
are
with.
words.
If you
I'm not.
disagree with that they're words, if you
I'm
think
not
I'm
sure they're
speaking in this
words.
gibberish or nonsense, not
I think
words,
I think
then
I'm
that's
talking
fine.
to a script. I think I'm talking to a
yeah,
script.
I think it's someone who's very bored with his life.
Bored? Why would I be bored?
Yeah.
So Bob,
What shape
let's
is
say
this? Go ahead, Phil. Sorry.
let's say a year from now, you come to the conclusion that the Earth is a globe. Do you
Okay.
think you'll look back and say, "Man, there was all this evidence, photos, satellites, the Odyssey, GPS, all this stuff the whole time staring me right in the face. How did I possibly not believe?" Do you think you'll feel that way?
No, because if in a year I think the Earth is a globe, then what I would be thinking is, man, this piece of evidence that convinced me, that's what I was missing, is this piece of evidence that was verifiable, credible, and repeatable. Why would I be
What do
worried
you,
about things that aren't verifiable, credible, and repeatable when I have
what
something
do
that
you
is right in front of me?
what do you think that piece of evidence is going to look like?
That's a trap.
That's
That's a
that's
trap.
another absurd question.
There's
I have absolutely no way to answer
evidence
what
that
that
would
might
ever
look like.
count.
There's literally limitless possibilities of what something could be
Yeah.
as far as evidence in the future.
Real Bob Dole, I don't believe you. I don't think there's any evidence that would ever change your mind, ever.
That's fine. I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I technically right now there's more evidence that I'm willing to change my mind than any of you because I did think we lived on a ball. Now I'm sure that I don't live on a ball. So I've changed my mind at least once.
Why is
Whereas as
that?
far as I know, you've not changed yours at all. So if anything, it's more credible that I would eventually change my mind than that you would.
What piece of evidence made you change your mind?
It wasn't just one piece of evidence, it was multiple things that I saw and heard explained and then demonstrated, sometimes with models, sometimes with videos, and then actually going out and looking at it myself and seeing it and thinking this actually does make sense from my observations.
So it was
What they're
based on
saying does make sense.
what other people said again?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think Aussie wants to know specifics.
Yeah, I'd love to know what specifically you went out and did that made you discount all of the other, I guess, evidence that we live on a globe. What piece of evidence made you discount everything else?
It must have came from your five
Oh,
senses,
okay,
right?
so it is possible that again I did not clarify well enough. I did not shift from it is positive that it is this thing to it is positive it is this other thing. That didn't happen.
Didn't
All
you
I
just
did
say you
was
went from believing it was a globe to not?
right. I went from I thought it was a globe based on nothing, and then I realized it was based on nothing and went to I don't believe it is anything. I just know it's not that.
His question of what specifically changed your mind is still standing.
Yeah, I don't have a specific, just that I can
Well,
see too far.
specifics.
I have no reason to believe that I'm spinning because I don't feel any spin. I have no reason to believe that gravity is real. I don't feel myself being pulled down. There's nothing in my life that tells me that I'm on a spinning ball. There are senses that I can actually use that says it's not a spinning ball. I walk outside,
Yeah.
I look,
Okay.
it looks like a plane.
So just addressing your specific point, which was that you were able to change your mind because you believed it was a globe for a long time until you heard other people and saw a number of things yourself, went out and tested yourself. I'm asking, what are those specific things that you heard people say and went out and tested yourself that made you change your mind?
That's what I just said to you. Was I can walk outside and look and see, and I came to the conclusion that the thing that I was being told that I took for an assumption or granted was actually I have nothing to base it on. So it reverted back to a neutral. I thought
I'm
that
not
we
sure
lived
I
on a ball
understand.
because I was told we lived on a ball. I thought we were spinning because I was told we were spinning. Then I realized there's nothing to back those claims up from things that I've seen and have had explained. And then I went out and looked. I've determined that there's nothing to back those claims up. Therefore, I don't believe them anymore.
Okay, so what did you see and what did you have explained that made that change? That's what I'm asking for. You just said, apart from the things you saw and had explained, what were those things?
So being able to
specifically?
like zoom in to distances and see further than it seems like we should be able to based on the claimed size of the Earth. And then, of course, the fact that every experience I have in life tells me that motion is detectable by me, and yet there's like 4 different motions that we're claimed to be having in the heliocentric model that I don't feel ever, even though they are like these colossal forces that are even beyond anything we would normally feel. That tells me, oh, it must not be true because there's nothing that backs that up for me. I have no senses that tell me that that's accurate. So until someone shows me something that I can verify, like I said, with one or more of my 5 senses, I'm not going to just believe those things anymore. I'm going to require that they show me verifiably.
You understand that that's not what the model says, right? You know that the strongest force you should feel from all that motion is the 0.02 meters per second upward from the rotation of the Earth, and all the other speeds are less?
That might be true. I still don't feel it.
Do you think you should feel 0.02 meters per second upward?
I think that I should feel any motion that interacts with my body because that's my experience. That's what I can actually detect with my senses.
But we could empirically show you that that's not true because we could put you on a merry-go-round and move you in one rotation per day on a merry-go-round and you would not feel that, yet you are moving.
I would be able to sense it though.
How?
No, you
I
wouldn't.
would be able to look and see the other things going past and sense that I was moving.
No, you're in a
Like
closed.
we look at the
you're in a
sky
closed
and see the
box.
transition of the stars, for example, yes?
Yeah, that's what we see. We do see what you would expect to see if we were rotating.
So
We
you're in a
see
closed.
something.
So you're in a closed box on the merry-go-round, and the merry-go-round is
So the
turning.
problem here is you're using your eye, like you're seeing things moving around you as proof that you're moving in that instance, but you're not using that same
No.
logic to apply to seeing the stars moving. So you're
I'm
using
not
it when it
saying that
suits
I'm
you,
moving
but you're not
anything.
you're not using the same logic when it doesn't suit you.
No, I am
It's not
using my
consistent.
logic.
Completely
I'm
arbitrary.
not
Completely
trying
arbitrary.
to prove anything. You're misstating what I'm saying because I have not tried to prove anything to you at all, and I'm not saying that I am. What I'm
Logically
saying,
inconsistent though.
my senses don't tell me that I am moving, therefore I won't believe that I am moving. That's different from saying that I'm absolutely not moving.
You just said that your senses are telling you that you're moving because you can see it on this said merry-go-round. But
Yes,
you
on a
can see the
merry-go-round,
stuff
my senses would
moving,
tell me that I'm
but
moving.
you're not.
So if you told
Okay,
me I
but you're
was
not
moving
saying
on
that
a
your senses are
merry-go-round,
telling
I
you
would
that the
believe
Earth is
that.
moving. Okay, but you're now saying that your senses are not telling you that the Earth is rotating, even though it's the exact same logic that you're using. You're using that logic to determine that
I see what the
you
problem is. The
merry go
problem is
round.
that
You're now saying that
there's at
exact
least,
same logic cannot
right.
be used looking at
Here's
the
the problem with
transition
that.
of the stars.
There's at least 2 acceptable answers to the scenario you're giving, and you're only offering one as acceptable. There's 2 acceptable answers. If
Well,
you see the movie
no,
with
that's
your
not
eyes,
what he's
you're
offering.
moving or it's moving. You're saying only one of those is acceptable, which means you're assuming already what the answer is. If I'm on a merry-go-round and I see that I am moving, it's entirely possible, you're right, that I'm moving or the things that I'm seeing that look like they're moving are moving. One of those 2 things could be true. They obviously could both be true, but they can't both be not true, right? You're
But
already saying I'm on the merry-go-round, so you've already taken the other option off the table. You're not allowed to do that if we're going to talk about the example leading to reality. That's you begging the question. Am I on the
no,
merry-go-round or not?
what your senses tell you is that motion is happening.
Yes. Motion is happening. So it could be me moving or it could be them moving.
Okay, well, we're halfway there then. Rather than a moment ago where you used this example or as an example of how no movement is happening.
No. I said that they don't tell me that I am moving, so I don't believe that I am. If you put me on a merry-go-round and spin me, I can see that I'm moving and I can feel that I'm moving. And if you told me I was moving, I would agree. I believe it
We
because I'm
just
sensing it.
1 second. You've added something there. We've just asserted that you cannot feel that you're moving because we're talking about 1 rotation per day. So your only sense that you're relying on is the visual sense in this situation, which is analogous to the visual sense of seeing the transition of the
Right.
stars.
If I'm
What I'm
only
saying is
relying
that
on my vision, then
you're
there's
using
2
that logic
possibilities.
you're using that logic to affirm to yourself that you're moving on the merry-go-round, but you're refusing to use that exact same logic to affirm that the planet's moving that you are also on.
No,
That's the logical
you're
inconsistency
changing
that
the
I'm talking
parameters.
about.
You are changing the parameters. You're saying that I cannot feel the merry-go-round when I know I would be able to. Okay. Now I can
No,
accept that. I
no,
can't feel the merry-go-round.
no.
But
You
that still
cannot.
leaves
You
2
cannot
acceptable answers.
feel the merry-go-round.
1 rotation per day on a merry-go-round. It's physically not moving fast enough for you to feel.
Okay. All right, fine. I'll give you that, even though I know that that's not true,
How is that not true?
because you can feel motion. That's
How
what
do
I'm
you
telling you.
Can you
how does your body feel motion?
I don't know. It just does. I have no explanation for you on how it does things. I don't know how it sees things or hears things. All I know is that it does.
Do you think
So how
there's
do you
any limit?
know that you would feel this once per day rotation
Because
on
I
merry-go-round?
always feel motion.
Do you always feel motion if you're moving once per day? Have you ever experienced that in your life?
I've never experienced only moving that slow, which means it's not something that I need to worry about.
Plate
I think
tectonic.
you
And
do
I'm
need
not
to
saying
worry
it's
about it.
been
impossible. I'm just
moving
saying I
1
don't
inch
believe
a
it's
year.
true until I'm shown that it's true. If you can show me, if you can have me
Yes.
actually sense that
Sure.
literal example of me
Sure.
moving that slow,
Sure.
then I will accept that.
Sure. Have you ever been
Just
in a
going to run in
car?
a circle.
Have you ever been in a car?
That's really easy to test, though. You can literally go down to any playground and test that and verify to yourself that you can indeed not detect a motion of a merry-go-round or a child's playground equipment moving that slowly. You can physically go down and test that.
Or you
How-
could be.
how
Have you ever been,
would you-
Bob Dole? Have you ever been in a car, and maybe the brake came off or something, and it starts moving forward very, very slowly, and you don't realize it until it gradually picks up speed?
Well, no, and no matter how rational you present a situation to him, if he's never specifically done that one thing, he will tell you that he cannot agree with you, no matter how logically coherent it is.
I can't accept just based on you providing that
Yeah,
example
there you
that it's
go.
absolutely true for the Earth.
Yeah,
No. So let's
I've
say-
like fallen asleep in a car and then woken up and for a moment not known whether or not the car was moving, or not.
Okay.
That's happened to me.
Do you spend your days in that state, or
That's not the point.
Is that relevant?
That's not the point.
Well,
The point
it
is
is relevant because
no.
now
The point is that I
if
couldn't.
if you're saying that is a demonstration, then that means that's the state we would have to be in to be feeling it each and every day.
No, that doesn't follow. I'm just saying
We're
that
talking
How
about
does
the
it not
there are
follow?
cases where I don't
You're
necessarily.
giving me an extreme example and saying let's apply it to everything, every day, every second.
Falling
with this
asleep in a
extreme
car is not an
example.
extreme example.
How is that not an extreme? Okay, then you do spend your days in that state if it's not an extreme example.
It's just
We're
worthless.
talking-
It's just
example, if it's not
you're a liar. You're a liar, Bob Dole. You're a liar.
I haven't made a claim. How am I a liar?
Bob, we're talking about the
let's not get
sensitivity
sidetracked.
of your sense.
Back to you acknowledging that there can be movement without you being able to physically detect it, other than your sight. That's what we're trying to establish.
Yeah. Do you think there's
There can
any
be
limit?
movement.
Is there any
and-
limit to the sensitivity of your body to feel motion? Any limit whatsoever to its precision?
I don't know.
We can't actually discuss how the body works because he doesn't know. He's never seen it. He won't trust anybody that tells
I won't
tells him,
take
right?
it as truth that the body has motion that it can't detect when it's in motion. I
Yeah.
won't take it as truth simply because you claim it's possible.
Do you accept
If I
we
experience it at some point, then that's fine. I will accept it as something that can happen.
Well, maybe maybe you need to go find a squirrel and get yourself a sharp knife and dig its cochlea out. Take a
Why
look
are
in
you
there.
guys so happy to accept things that you haven't
I'm not
felt
sure
or done yourself? Like, why are you so quick to accept
No, we accept things.
and
or
so
at
quick
least-
to belittle him for not accepting?
Well, we accept things based on rational evidence and things like that.
Yeah, and that's a personal choice. And he's
Right,
just saying
right.
my personal choice is I'm not prepared to do that. But you guys just seem to
He's
be
irrational.
desperate
I
to
prefer to
take his
that's
personal
fine.
choice away from him
No,
and
nobody's
force your
taking his
choices
choice-
on him.
Nobody's taking his choices away from him.
No,
Brenda,
but you're
you use
belittling
this word-
him and calling him names because he's saying this is my personal
Nobody's-
choice. You don't have to
nobody's
believe
calling,
it.
Nobody's calling him
at the
names.
same time, Paige,
Nobody's
Brenda-
calling
Brenda
him names.
You were calling him a
this
sea
word
lion. I
called
heard you.
Nobody's calling him names.
Rational.
You called
Brenda,
him a
why
sea
do you-
lion. I heard it from across the
Yeah,
room.
nobody's calling him names. Be quiet.
Is anyone here under the impression that
And you called him a liar.
Yes.
The person that thinks that is our Paige, mate. Everyone's been having a civil discussion. She's the only one that thinks you're angry.
I'm not angry.
Brenda
I
Brenda
assure you I'm
uses
not.
this word called rational, but yet
I don't think
he has-
Bob's
he
angry
has
at all.
no
No,
idea what that
no,
means.
he's been very good.
Everyone's been very civil, Paige, so we're not attacking him. We're not calling him names.
So calling someone a sea lion and a liar isn't calling them names.
Sea lions.
No one called him a liar.
Yeah, yeah,
Paige, are you just trying to
yeah.
stir up
So
shit?
more
You
lies.
get along?
No, sea lioning is the technique that he's employing. Hence the.
She didn't say sea lioning. She said he's the worst sea lion I've ever met or something.
Yeah.
So she just
so calling
she called
him
him a.
names.
He's
She called him
employing.
a sea
And she
creature.
called him a liar just a second ago. So.
Yeah, it's a
He's also
dishonest.
doing that.
It's a dishonest tactic that people use sometimes.
Well, my intention isn't to be dishonest, so I'm not sure what to tell you about that. I have no intention to be dishonest. If you think that my logic follow through the way that I'm discussing this is somehow dishonest,
Well, negator
that's
and
not my
rational.
intention.
Yeah, I understand. I understand you don't perceive it that way, but negator and rational Aussie and the others have caught you several times in contradictions.
Okay.
They've caught
Okay.
you in contradictions.
I don't see those as contradictions, but that's fine.
Okay.
Yep, those are
Personally, I
words.
don't-
Yep, and we're
Go ahead.
talking.
All right, hold on. Let's get back to where we're at.
Yeah, that's right. So
So-
if we could get back on track, would you say that you are interested in what's true? Is that a fair assumption?
Well, hold on. I want to go back to this last example real quick and finish up where we were at with the rotation thing, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was leading to that.
So, So Bob, you're down to these two options, right? Either you
Right.
are spinning or you're not spinning. You can't make a decision between those two things right now.
No, those aren't the two options. The two options are I'm moving or they're moving or both.
Okay, got you. Okay, so we need some kind of a tiebreaker. If you take that uncertainty and then you add in all of the evidence that we are rotating, like hurricanes and Foucault pendulum and gyro compasses and ringed laser gyros and superfluid phase coherence tests and on any number of things that show that we are rotating, doesn't that break the tie for you?
Here's why it doesn't break the tie. None of those things are based on one of my five senses. So the way that
Oh
I would look
God.
at it is I
We
can
went past
see
that. We're past this five senses crap, though. We determined that that's not the only way you have to determine reality. We spent a half an hour figuring
no,
out that
I
that's
never agreed
not
to
the
that.
only thing that
I
counts.
never agreed to that. That it was
You
that you
absolutely
could
did.
determine reality without them. I said you can make a decision without them, but that decision is automatically subjective.
But we're talking about the decision. That's the whole point here. It's not
Right.
life or death. It's how you make a rational decision.
What you're asking me is why doesn't all of this evidence
Yeah.
basically break the tie? And what I'm
Yes.
telling you is that the reason it doesn't break the tie is because I would use my other sense to
Oh, for
break
fuck.
the tie.
But we just said that
Okay.
you don't have the sensory capability to tell either
Right.
way. That's where we just got.
That's in the scenario that you're talking about, you're deciding that I don't have the capability to detect it. Okay.
Okay, so
You're
this is
telling me
something
to
that
apply that. You're telling me to apply that then to the decision about the shape of the Earth, right? And
okay.
what I'm
Can I just
saying
jump
is
in?
we can't apply the absolute knowledge of I can't feel the Earth spin to the Earth spin. We can't apply the absolute knowledge of I can't feel the merry-go-round to the Earth spin because we don't know that I can't feel the Earth spin. We do know I can't feel the merry-go-round. Your example is created by you. The world wasn't created by you. The example is created by you, so I can go with you on that assumption that I can't feel the merry-go-round. So my eyes are telling me something, and I have to make a decision based only on my eyes. But it's not logical to take that and then say, oh, I absolutely can't feel the Earth because in the example I couldn't feel the merry-go-round, and then say that's absolute truth. That is nonsense.
Is this
We're using the
religious?
same angular velocity. That's the whole point. You can do a small scale experiment and then apply it to a larger scale. That's the whole point of what we're saying. If you can verify that you can't feel that amount of angular velocity at that on that smaller scale, then you can apply that to a larger scale because the angular velocity is the same.
But you've assumed
That's our whole point.
Right?
And you can scale it up as large as you like, and you can actually test this yourself. You can physically go down and test this, and then you can scale it up if you like, and you can continue to scale up, and you can make a logical assumption based on what you understand
Here's what you're
that
saying.
you wouldn't be able to feel it.
Here's the velocity. If we do that on the merry-go-round, you can't feel it. You can't feel it on the Earth. Therefore, it's that velocity. That's not logical. You're assuming the velocity to begin with to do your small experiment, saying, oh, you can't feel it. And then you're saying, okay, now apply that to the Earth. It automatically means that it's that velocity because you can't feel it. That is not a logical argument. You're assuming
Yes, it is.
to begin with. You have to
It's-
show the velocity first and then do the experiment. You have to prove that the Earth is moving at that velocity, and then you can show why we can't feel it.
But here's the thing. If we are spinning, you can tell the angular speed just by looking at the sky. So we know it's 15 degrees per hour because we make it all the way around in a day.
If we are spinning, but we might not be.
Okay,
But
so
if
then
your reason to believe we're not spinning is that you can't feel it, we need to address that to begin with.
But the way you would have to address that is to use one of my five senses to show me why that other sense is lying and
it's not
the
lying.
senses you're showing me with aren't.
We're not showing
It's
that
not
it's
lying,
lying.
though. We're proving to you that that sense can't be used in this situation, which is the whole point.
Redshift background radiation.
But to show that, you had to assume the velocity to begin with. Because you
Well-
had to assume a velocity that I could not feel on the merry-go-round. You had to pick one that I couldn't feel so that you could later apply it to the larger experiment and say, look, you can't feel it. Must be true.
No, it's the observable spin that we can see. Either the sky is moving
So like I
360
said, you are
degrees in a day,
assuming the
or the
velocity
Earth
to
is
begin
moving
with and then
360 in a
say,
day.
oh, it must be that velocity.
No.
That's not
But
at all how this is
Okay, so let's
Yeah.
pick a different velocity for the merry-go-round. Let's say I'm
once per
moving.
day.
Let's say I'm moving 100,000 times per day. Can I feel that velocity?
But that's not what we're comparing to. That's not the
Okay,
model.
exactly. That's not what you're comparing to. That's my point. You're picking a velocity that already you know would work, and then
No.
saying, "See, it works."
No, we're
That's
looking
not
at
logical.
reality. We're looking at reality, and we see one rotation per day. It's
Now
either
you're
of the
stating
sky
that
or it's of
the
the earth.
reality
But we
No.
see that.
we're contending.
Now
That's
he's
the
going to
contention.
RPM.
Well, at a
Now he's going to
minimum,
RPM.
what it
He's
would
going
show is at a
from
minimum,
speed to
it would
RPM.
show that you can't feel that RPM, right? And you would have to agree you couldn't feel that. No,
Is there
sure,
a
yeah, later down
speed
the road we can show
equated
you
with
how
RPM?
to determine the angular velocity of Earth. We can, but first, us agreeing you can't is what needs to happen. And it sounds like you've agreed.
I'm okay with saying you may not be able to feel that, but that doesn't fix the end part of the problem where you have the two options and you've already decided on one. You're saying that the one should be picked because your body of evidence that I haven't seen nor have I verified is somehow supposed to outweigh my evidence that I have.
But you don't have it.
But I guess one of your evidences was that you can't feel it.
Right. That's the problem. You're saying that your evidence that I can't see or verify in any way outweighs mine.
Well, you
No,
can see and verify it,
we're
though.
using a separate
No, I can't.
example
There's
of
no
why
way for
you
me to
couldn't feel
verify
it
that
to say that
spin
that's
was
not
on
good
the
evidence
Earth.
against it.
There's no way for me to do that. I can take your
There absolutely is.
No, there
But
isn't.
it requires a certain understanding that you don't seem to be interested in having.
There is no way for you to show that to me.
That's false.
That's the only way it could work.
Still false.
For you to show me that that's the only way it could work, you would have to know all the ways it can't work and know that it can't work in those ways.
Yeah, also still false.
So what if me and you made a Foucault pendulum and a gyro compass? And what was the third one? Oh, and there's also a way that I just put in the chat where you can use a low-cost memes accelerometer to detect the rotation of Earth. So that's 3 methods that literally you and I could do ourselves.
Using tools developed to detect something that you assume is there is not a valid way of proving reality.
That's false.
Yeah,
But they can be verified on things other than that.
The tool was made to verify the thing that you already assume to be true. So that means that it is not a valid way to prove reality.
No, the tool was used was made to verify a particular style of motion, not because it assumes there is a motion happening. The tool was developed to discern a type of motion. You can test that motion in a number of different ways and then apply it.
So it was made entirely independent of the concept that the Earth moves.
No, that's a different.
No tool is made independent of a concept. Every tool requires a reason to be made. Otherwise, there's no point in having that tool.
Maybe I didn't state it. That's not what I was saying. Not that it didn't have an intention at all. Was it made entirely independent of the concept that the Earth moves?
Why does this matter?
Because if it wasn't, what you're saying is it doesn't make any sense. It had to be made with the assumption that the Earth moved because it was going to be used to detect if the Earth moved.
And if that were the case, why would that invalidate the tool or the tool's purpose or tool's usefulness? It's like saying my speedometer is useless because it was built specifically to measure speed.
Yep.
If I told you I was going to go make a device that can detect unicorns, okay? Unicorns, we agree, don't exist, right? So, at least we don't have any verifiable, credible evidence that they're real. So what I would need to do first is come up with what I think a unicorn would be, and then tell the tool how to detect those parameters, and then now I have a unicorn detecting device. That's why it matters. If you are making a tool to detect that motion, it must have been made with that motion in mind and already assumed to exist.
Actually,
no,
I don't think
what you described is purely arbitrary.
Yeah.
I don't think the MEMS chips were designed to detect the motion of the Earth. They were
No.
based on very practical things. They wanted people to be able to know whether the iPhone is held vertically or horizontally. Pretty much.
Yeah, I'd also say that the unicorn example is a little bit disingenuous because we had reason to believe there was rotation before we developed the tools to detect it. So we had an idea as to what we thought was true, and then we went about developing tools to prove whether or not that was true. We didn't develop a tool to show it was true. We developed a tool to detect whether or not it was true based on good reasoning or a good guess as to what we think might be the case. Now, we don't think unicorns are true, so building a unicorn detecting device is pretty disingenuous when you're comparing it to building something that detects rotation.
Okay, so the tool wasn't built to detect rotation.
Well, it
The
doesn't
tool was
matter.
built to detect rotation, but we had a good idea as to, like, we had an idea that there was rotation first, so we went about trying to develop a tool that may detect it. That's how almost all scientific experiments go. We think that something is true, so we design a way to test whether it's true.
Yeah.
That's the core of the scientific method.
Your
But
unicorn
the core
was
of the
a
scientific
false
method doesn't
analogy.
have to involve a tool. It can just involve doing the thing.
Tools
Well,
are useful.
let's think
They are
about what we're
useful,
doing
yes.
here. With the Foucault pendulum, we're literally just swinging a ball on a string, and we
Okay.
see that it rotates depending on your latitude. It's not some machine that was designed. It's a fucking ball swinging on a string.
So, okay, so this tool, you call it a Foucault pendulum, and
Yeah.
the tool detects. You're saying it detects motion of the Earth, or it
What it
detects
does,
motion, or what does it
what it
do?
does is it stays fixed relative to space. It maintains its rigidity in space. It just swings back and forth. So if the
Okay,
Earth spins, that thing's gonna rotate.
so how does it? Wait a
Do you
minute.
really not know
You're
about Foucault's
saying that
pendulum?
it stays in the same place relative to the space around it?
It maintains its rigidity in space, just like a gyroscope. It spins and it wants to stay there no matter what happens around it. So if you spin what's around it, it's going to appear to rotate.
So, but how do you know that that's what it does if it was made on Earth and you think the Earth spins? How would you know the
Because
tool was calibrated properly? Wouldn't it have to have been made in space where it
you don't
absolutely
you don't
wasn't
have to
moving?
there's no calibration whatsoever. It just matches the map and it spins exactly the amount it should depending on your latitude, from 0 at the equator to 90 at the North Pole. It
But
matches
okay,
exactly what the physics says it should.
but what if that isn't what it's doing? What if it's doing that because of a different reason?
Well,
If
the
you
thing
have a
about
better
science,
explanation for it, then you're probably going to get a Nobel Prize.
Oh no,
yeah,
I don't have a better explanation. I'm just saying you're saying that it absolutely means this one thing, but what it sounds like is it's just a ball on
no,
a string, and there's
in
technically infinite reasons for why it could be acting like that.
in science,
Well,
the
then provide
best
one.
evidence in science, the best evidence is you make a novel, testable prediction. You say, if
Okay.
I make a Foucault pendulum at this latitude, it will rotate this much. And we do it, and it does.
But
That's the
how
best
would
kind
you
of
know
evidence you
it
can
would
get.
rotate that much if you don't know if the Earth is spinning yet?
So you're
We don't,
correct.
because that's
Wouldn't you have
You're
already
correct a
know
little bit,
at what
Bob
speed the
Dole.
Earth would need to be spinning to know how much it would have moved?
no. It's a physical prediction based on our understanding of physics.
How do you know how much it should have moved if you're not assuming the Earth was spinning?
You can just
Mathematics.
figure out what the
If you're assuming
percentage
the
of the
Earth is
twist it will
stationary in
compared
the
to the
test,
rotation.
then you would have no way to determine what it should do because you've never had experience with a rotating Earth because you're assuming it's stationary. So
Yeah.
you would
You
have no
assume
way
the
to
Earth's
determine what the
stationary,
result
you'd
should
assume it
be
wouldn't
on
move.
a moving Earth.
Well,
You
see,
can,
that's where your understanding comes into play, and if you don't understand the physics behind it, then it's not going to make sense to you.
Okay, well, then maybe I don't understand the physics behind it, I guess.
It's like if my 4-year-old were to ask why I drive to a building and then stick a tube into my car and some liquid comes out and magically my car keeps going. You know, my 4-year-old could dispute all day long what makes my car goes because she doesn't know how internal combustion engines work.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the case here. Your level of education and understanding is not where it needs to be to follow through on these sorts of lines of reasoning.
Okay. Well, I'm willing to accept that. That's fine. If I don't have the education that's far enough that you guys think is acceptable to continue the conversation down this line, then that's
I'm
No,
not
fine.
it's
convinced that that's. I'm
I'm
not
not going to
convinced
insist
that
that
that's
we
the
continue.
case. I think
But we can put you in the right direction. It's up to you whether or not you choose to get that understanding, though. If you choose not to, then you're remaining willfully ignorant, and there isn't really no point in continuing.
No, I think
How
it's
would you
religion. It's
determine what the
religion,
right
isn't it?
direction is?
It's religion, isn't it, Bob
What do you
Dole?
mean the right direction? Like a direction that would help me personally, like in my life, or just a direction that would get the answer that you already think is true?
just
No,
to
no.
help
Like
you
say,
discern
let's say you don't
reality.
understand calculus. I can say, here's a book on basic calculus. Once you read
Okay,
that and
yeah,
understand it, then you'll understand basic calculus. Then you'll be able to
right.
understand
Okay,
basic concepts in calculus. Same with physics. Here's a book
I
on
agree with
physics,
that. Yeah,
basic physics.
that makes
Once you
sense.
learn the basic physics, and we're talking about the reasons things happen based on physics, you will then understand. Until you choose to do that, you're remaining willfully ignorant. But you cannot gainsay the reasoning behind something just because you choose not to understand it.
No, I'm not making the claim that you guys can't or shouldn't believe what you believe as far as these subjects goes.
No,
Like
it's
I'm not
just an
saying you have
understanding.
to
It's not a
believe
belief.
it.
It's an understanding. So, like when you
Okay,
learn the
so
physics,
yeah,
you'll
I think
understand
we
why
disagree
the
on the word
pendulum does what it
believe
does.
and what it means is all. That particular thing I think is and I like semantics, like he said earlier. That particular word, I think you think it means one thing, and I think it means something else entirely, uh, or at least something somewhat different. The word believe or belief. So,
Okay, so
but
let's
if
talk about
that's the way you
understanding. So,
guys
if
consider it
we
in
can
your
point you in
mind,
the right direction to learn the physics as to why the pendulum does what it does, and then once you learn the physics, you'll understand why it does what it does and why it proves what it proves. So it's just a lack of understanding, but we can point you in the right direction so that you no longer have that lack of understanding, and then you will have a proof as to why the Earth isn't flat.
okay. Do you have like a link or something showing like all the like the test that you're talking about or the device that you're talking about, or
Yeah,
somewhere
sure,
I can go and
sure,
look at
man.
it?
You can just Wikipedia Foucault's pendulum, and I'm sure they'll have all of the mathematics behind it, and then we can go through step
Bob,
by step if you like.
Eyes to See channel did a couple of live streams watching the pendulum and found some very interesting
Okay.
discrepancies, should we say.
No,
Oh,
she
for
didn't.
fuck's sake.
Well, I mean, there shouldn't be any problem with me looking at the thing itself that they're talking about, and then I mean, if I find
Yeah,
discrepancies
I
or
just
I
posted it
have
in the general
questions,
chat
then
for
I
you.
can go find more information about it. Like that's
Sure,
not
I
there shouldn't
just posted it in
nobody
the
on
general
either
chat for you.
side should have any problem with me looking into it, right? I mean,
Nobody
that
does.
should be acceptable by
There's
everybody.
nobody here has a problem with you looking into it.
No,
What
just giving you just pointing you
my
in the
comment
direction. That's
about
all.
what
Okay.
Paige mentioned was this flat earther watched it and claimed discrepancies. I even hopped into the stream at one point. She made a claim that it didn't move at all, and all I did was screenshot her own live stream from an hour prior, screenshot the current, and to show that there clearly was a movement and that she was looking for something that wasn't there, or she was lying. But by all means, look at anything you want. But
we're even willing to go one step further and help walk you through anything you don't understand about it. That's what I'm saying. It's not just a matter of allowing you to look it up
There's
yourself, but if
videos
there's
and stuff
anything you
on
don't
here.
understand, we're happy to go through it with you and clear up any misunderstanding.
Okay. Yeah, I put it into the thing I'm on. I'm not going to read through it tonight. It's almost midnight, but I have it up on my web browser already, and it looks like there's maybe even a couple of videos right there on the Wikipedia page,
So,
and
Bob,
some
let,
models and stuff.
let's say that you look into this and you figure out the physics and you figure out why it should work, and you find that these things are all over the world, have been for hundreds of years, and they always show that it's rotating and it shows your latitude, and it all works just the way it should. Would that count as any kind of evidence to you? Would you even give a shit whatsoever?
It would count as evidence. So that what it would come down to is what is it evidence of? So, um, if it comes down to it and it looks like it is evidence of what it what you're claiming it's evidence of, then that's very intriguing and very important, okay? Because then that means that what you're telling me is it holds water, it has weight, okay? Now, because now we've had a discussion for a pretty good long time here, you've now pointed me in direction of information. If that information tells me that it does mean what they claim it means, then that's a big deal. But
That's awesome. This is great. Then it's been a very productive day.
If all it does is do what they say it should do, that's a little bit different because I can come up with an experiment that does what I say it should do, but doesn't actually prove anything. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but all the math checks out, which is the beautiful thing about it, because it wouldn't do what it does unless the math explains that it only does what it does, because it can only do what it does on a sphere moving at the exact dimension and the exact speeds that we expect to see from the planet Earth. That's why it's a beautiful thing, and it's so simple. It's not a complicated device.
I'm going to the information.
Yeah, brilliant. Then we've had a very productive day.
And just for your information, I posted another 12 papers, all with independent measurements of the rotation of the Earth.
Okay.
And they're pretty cool. They got the link to the full PDF for every one of them in there, including ring laser gyroscopes, super fluid phase coherence and helium toroid, magnetically levitating gyroscope, all sorts of shit. And for some reason,
I don't
they
know
all
how
come out.
often you guys come on here, but now I've been listening to these chats, and then I just joined several weeks ago, like actually coming in myself. But and I don't know if you've talked to them about these specific things. It seems like these things are mentioned sometimes, but not necessarily gotten into it. I could have just missed it. Actually, it's possible that this has already been super discussed and gone through. But
this has been a good.
It's usually the. Yeah, if I could just jump in and address that. It's usually the case that once we start trying to logically and reasonably get into these discussions, things go off on a tangent. People talk over each other, people argue, people change the topic.
Yeah.
We've had a beautiful discussion here where we've been able to stay on topic and slowly work through the things we need to work through, which is very productive. Unfortunately, that's not normally the case.
Yeah, there are certain people who deliberately try to derail conversations and confuse things. They do that deliberately.
And there are people who don't care.
Get excited about making their point. Even I do that sometimes. I get excited about making my point, and then I try to jump in and make my point. But
honestly,
I'm very, very confident that if you're intellectually honest here, this will be a paradigm shift for you, because it's a very, very simple experiment, very simple device, and it's virtually inexplainable in any other way other than it working on a rotating sphere. So I look forward to you looking into it.
He gave himself
more
an
than
out.
happy.
He gave himself an out, though.
That's okay. I'm happy for him to give himself an out. But if you're being intellectually honest with yourself and with us, this will be a game changer for you.
There's very few things in life that I wouldn't give myself an out in. I mean, that's just I'm not sure if it sounded like you said that as if it was negative. I don't see that as a negative. I think that's a normal human thing, is that they will attempt to give themselves an out in any situation where they think that they might need one, or that they could be useful.
That's the difference between you and me. Is I have certain commitments, and so I don't give myself outs within.
Right, that would be one of the few
things.
places where you don't give yourself an out, is if you're making a commitment to somebody and it is an important thing, which if you're making a commitment, it should already be important, right? So that would be one of the few cases where you don't give yourself an out.
Right.
You're making
a commitment
and purposely not giving yourself an out. That's what the commitment is, right?
I have a commitment. I have a commitment to the truth, and to make my beliefs conform with the truth as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that. That's what I'm trying to do. I think that if somebody, he said, if I'm intellectually honest, I think that if anyone is honest, like in the absolute sense of the word, if they are an honest person, that they will find what is true. They will find truth.
We keep on crossing our fingers, that's for sure.
Well, I don't think that honesty is necessarily going to take you to truth. I think that there are procedures of reasoning that you need to use, and you need to stick to those.
I think they're connected. I don't think that those are separable. I think that like logic and reason has to be of an honest kind, otherwise it's not actual logic and reason. It is deception or falsity, or I'm not sure what word you would use for it. But if it's not connected or inextricably linked to honesty, then I don't think that it's actually really logic or really reason. It is,
I don't see
lying
it.
to yourself, lying to someone else.
Yeah, I don't see it that way. I see if 2 + 2 is 4, it has nothing to do with honesty. It has to do with whether or not it's true. So that's how I see it. I don't see them as connected.
Okay. I'm not sure that I don't think that we need to agree on that right now or anything. That's fine.
Right. So when I see the evidence, which is there's a lot of evidence. There are photographs and videos from space showing the Earth. There's all kinds. There's pendulums and gyroscopes. There's ships going over the horizon. There's measurements of curvature by geodesic surveys. There's personal testimony by people. All of those things all together show me that the Earth is round and rotates, and the moon is 240,000 miles away, and the Earth rotates about the sun. All those things are shown to be true, and not because of people say so, but because reason tells me they must be so.
I can accept that. I won't tell you not to go with that or not to think that way.
So, just before I go, I gotta get out of here pretty quick. Do you think the moon looks like it's a solid spherical object?
Do I think it looks like a solid spherical object?
Yeah.
Not to my eye. No, it doesn't look
Oh,
like
you
that
gotta
to
be
me. It looks
joking me.
like
There's shadows. It has shadows on
Just
it.
when I had hope in you, Bob, you
it
went
looks
and
like
said it.
a bright light or something,
But there's shadows on it. There's shadows.
Well, there's something on it. I mean, I can't go to it
Those
and
are
look and
shadows.
see, oh, that's a shadow. I just know that there's dark spots and stuff on it.
No, it's not just dark spots. You
Bob, come on, man.
Come on. You can see
Have
them
you
in the
looked at the moon
telescope.
through a good telescope?
What's that?
Have you looked at the moon through a good telescope?
No, I don't own a telescope. I consider getting one, and I think I probably will eventually. When I looked online, they're the nice ones seem pricey, and
Yeah, okay.
I spent recently quite a bit of money on one of those P1000, so it'll be a little while before I go out again like that big and get like a nice telescope.
Well, we've seen.
You got a P1000?
Yeah, I bought one a month or two back or so.
Okay.
Oh, well, look at the moon with it, for fuck's sake, because that thing is a solid object.
Well, wouldn't shadows and mountain ranges and the craters indicate that it has solidity?
So you're labeling those things, but I don't have a good reference point for automatically assuming that that's what those things are.
You don't have a good reference point for shadows?
For assuming that that's what's on the moon.
Can you-
I see a light in the sky, and it could
Can you
be
see-
shadows.
Can you see that picture I've just posted in general text? That's a photograph I took through my telescope using my phone camera.
Yeah,
you can see on that top edge. You can see on the top edge craters and shadows.
Yeah, those are shadows.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you can see something on there. Yeah, I mean that looks like craters and shadows for sure. That's what it looks like.
What
then
it
you
looks
trust your
like.
senses, right?
Right, so you're going to go with your senses here, right? It looks like a duck quacks like a duck.
I would
It must
say at
be
the
a duck.
very least, what it looks like is at least half of a sphere, right? I mean, we can't see the back part of it right now, at least in the
No, of course not. It's not about that though. It's about it being a solid object or not. It's not about how much of it you can see.
Well, okay, so here's the problem with saying, like, I can accept that those could be shadows. They look like shadows to me. I won't tell someone else that they have to be, but they look like shadows.
Well, that's a step.
But
Yeah, you go by your senses. You go by your senses.
But
right?
a hologram can look like that too. Like you can have a hologram.
You go by your senses, though.
And it's not actually solid.
Hologram
Right.
won't cast
I would
shadows.
go by my senses. What my senses tell me is that those are shadows. So for me personally, I would say, yeah, those are shadows. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
But what I won't
Right.
say for sure is that something up there in the sky that I can't even get remotely close to acts the same way as everything down here on Earth. Like, I
Why
mean,
wouldn't it?
that would be like me standing on a table and pointing to the chairs and seeing, see, they must be tables because I'm on the table. Like, I mean, that's not reasonable.
Well, the chairs have shadows, don't they? Or can
That's
you
not the
not
point,
know?
though.
Can you not know if the table has shadows? Can you not know if chairs have shadows?
I can't assume that the rules for shadows on Earth automatically to apply to things that aren't on
Why
Earth.
not? Why not?
I mean, I can. Like, it's not like I'm incapable. I can. I'm just saying I won't personally
Well, why
assume
not?
that as
Why
true.
not? Why not then?
Well,
I
why
mean, if
wouldn't
you're going to go
I
there,
mean,
you can't even know that's on Earth, can you? That could be on Earth.
what could be on Earth?
The moon.
The moon. Have you seen all of the Earth? No.
No, I
So how
haven't.
do you know the moon's not on Earth?
I don't know if I'm misunderstanding the question or if, like, it's obviously
Well, I
not
mean,
on the
just
Earth
trying to
up
show.
there, right? The
I'm
same
just
way I know a
I'm
plane
just
is
trying to
on the
show
ground, it's up
the
there,
illogic
right?
in your logic.
Yeah, this is why I bring up the case of
The
being
same reason that I
dishonest.
don't
This is
assume a plane is on
dishonesty
the
in my
ground when
book.
it's flying through the air because it's not on the ground, it's in the air. That's why I know it's not on the Earth. It's because it's in the air. So, I mean, that's
Well,
how.
just because it's in the air doesn't mean it couldn't be also on the ground at some point.
Yeah, I didn't say it's
Most
Yeah,
in
when
the
I
ground.
say
I just
what I
don't
meant
see
is
it.
you can't know if that's in the Earth system or not, can you?
No,
I
I
mean,
don't
by
know.
your logic.
No, I don't. You're right. I don't know if it's within the Earth system or outside of the Earth system. That's true. So I don't know for sure if it plays by the Earth's rules or not.
Well, shadows seem to be pretty basic rules.
They seem to us here, and maybe they're the same there.
Yeah,
And if I ever
yeah.
go there, then I might be able to find that out.
So you think it could be different on the moon? The shadows work differently.
I think that's possible. Sure, why not?
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Or what if the
You
thing that
know,
you're identifying as a shadow, maybe it's something different that we
I
haven't
just
detected
don't know if
over
this
here.
is even worth it. I really don't know. It's just a constant stream of lies. I consider this to be
I didn't claim that they are something
dishonesty.
different. That can't
I
be a
consider
lie
this
that
to
I'm
be
saying it's
this is
possible.
dishonesty in my book.
Why do you care so much about changing his mind, though? You don't know him. You're not going to meet him. It's not going to matter to your life. So, what does it
Wouldn't
matter if his personal opinion's different?
maybe there's something
Well,
that
then
hasn't
why any of us here?
yet?
I would really like to see
Well, honestly, I don't know why any Globers here, but I know that we come here to talk to each other about, what else things might be.
Well, Ranty has this show because he wants Globers and flat Earthers to meet and to debate.
Well,
That's what
everybody
he
on
wants.
both sides says. Everybody
Yes, that's
says
what
they're looking for
Ranty.
the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
Well, what's the
Yeah.
purpose of this server then? Is it about? Is the purpose for you guys to get together and talk about what you want to talk about?
No, Paige wants a server
For me
free.
personally, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Paige wants
Because
it
for
free
me,
of Globers.
I don't want to change your guys' minds. I don't have any desire to turn you guys into flat earthers or globe skeptics or anything, because I don't know you. I don't have any reason to, care what you believe.
Well,
At the
Isn't
end
this
of
a
the
flat
day,
Earth debate server?
Yeah,
Paige,
ditto.
Paige, Ranty has said that
Oh, you guys, I mean, if
he wants
you
to get
think
to the bottom of this.
that coming here to debate is what you want to do, then great.
No,
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying my personal opinion.
That's what Ranty wants.
Yeah,
Paige.
that's great.
Ranty wants
That's
to get
great.
to the bottom
It's
of it.
Ranty's server, not yours or mine.
Yeah, that's Ranty's personal opinion. Just like Bob's personal opinion about what he will
So maybe you should go
accept
somewhere else
as-
on Paige where you can be free of Globers.
It's not just the opinion, though. It's the purpose of the server.
So my purpose.
Yeah, and I'm not
server,
trying to change that.
Like, it would be. I listened to the show before I jumped in here and started talking to people on the channel or whatever, and I noticed more than once people like there were good points made, but then sometimes somebody would make a bad point, or they would make an argument that maybe sounded good but wasn't like logically sound. So my intention was to get in and like attempt to facilitate structuring the conversation in a more like foundationally strong way, so that because
But
like one of the first things I tried to get across whenever I started coming in was this idea of establishing a standard before you get like deep into the conversation, because if you don't establish a standard beforehand, it doesn't matter what either side says about anything, because they'll just say, well, I don't think that. Okay. I don't accept your standard. Right. So if you want to convince somebody else, you need to establish a standard. Now, it seems like what Aussie was trying to do earlier is he was talking to me directly, and he was trying to, I think, establish a standard, because without that, I mean, where would we have gotten anywhere in our conversation if he didn't try to figure out where we can agree on something first?
Yeah, but I
I
think we
think
also showed that you don't have any standards because
I
you
was
just
kind of gonna say that.
And that, like, I'm not going to like assault you because of your assessment. That's fine if that's your assessment. I disagree. I think my standards are perfectly valid, and
but you
contrary to
apply
what you
them
say, I
you
think
apply
they
them
do exist.
inconsistently. You apply them inconsistently.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. If that's the way you assess my standards, that's okay. I think I apply them consistently. I don't find myself contradicting myself. So I can accept that basically.
Well, good luck. I'm always hopeful that one of these uh